Hey guys, my name is Vardhan and I'll be your instructor for today's session. So on behalf of Edureka, I welcome you all to this webinar on Salesforce Developer. And in this Salesforce Developer webinar, I will be covering concepts of Salesforce development, like what can Salesforce Developer do? What is his job description, right? So as a developer in Salesforce, you will be building Visualforce pages. And how will you do that? You will be doing that on Apex, right? You'll be writing Apex codes. So I'll be talking about all these things. So do stay until the end of the session because there'll be a lot of demonstration here, and I'll be showing you how to build your own Visualforce page, how to get different data in there, and I'll show you how to build your own Apex code, which supports your Visualforce pages so that you can perform multiple transactions. And I'll be doing all these things. So before I get started, let me show you the agenda for today. And in here, I will show you the flow that I'll go in today's session. Okay. So first, I will talk about the MVC Architecture of Salesforce. So MVC stands for Model, View, and Controller. Now that is the backbone of the whole Visualforce and the Apex components. Okay, so that's how Salesforce works. So I will talk about this thing, and then after that, I'll talk about Visualforce in particular. I will tell you how to build your own Visualforce page. I'll show you what are the different things that can be done, and I'll tell you from where all your Visualforce can be accessed. I'll show you all those things. And after that, I will talk about Apex. So Apex is a different programming language altogether. Okay, so I will give you an introduction to that Apex programming language. I will talk about the different things. I'll talk about the different rules in the language, and then show you how to code in Apex so that it supports your Visualforce component. And then finally, I will show you how to test and manage exceptions which are generated in your code, because testing and exceptions are also an important part of developers' role, because it's not just about creating the Visualforce page and building the Apex code. It's also about managing that test and because whatever code you have, they all have to be divided into different test cases, right? So Salesforce have a minimum code coverage of 75%. So because of that reason, your code has to be in the form of test cases. So I will show you how to put your code in the form of test cases and make sure that you have a 75% code coverage. And then along with that, I will also show you how exceptions are dealt with, and how exceptions can be used to show the user what is the problem that he's facing when some kind of transaction does not happen. So that is the agenda for today, and that will be the flow, right? Now, before I get started, let me just take a quick confirmation from you guys. I hope I'm audible and you all can see my screen. Can you all please acknowledge? Okay, yeah. So there are a couple of people that are saying yes. So seems like everything's fine. Now let me get started with my session, okay? So first of all, I'm going to talk about the MVC architecture. So the MVC architecture is something that's adopted by multiple technologies. Like it's being used in Oracle, it's being used in even the JavaScript systems. So MVC, first of all, stands for Model, View, and Controller. Okay, when we say Model, View, and Controller, the MVC is responsible for controlling what your user sees on his screen. So how do you control that user interface? By defining your own logic, by defining the various components. Now, since it's all going to get complicated if you all do it all together in one single way, we have a different architecture here. Okay, this architecture is such that you have three different components. In one component, you have the view aspect, right? So whatever the user sees on the web page, or in our case, it's a Salesforce web page. So whatever the user sees on the Salesforce web page, that is controlled by this aspect. When the user makes some kind of transaction, when he makes some kind of action on the web page, then that needs to be recorded, and some other triggers need to be invoked. Now, the controller is responsible for that aspect. Okay. Now, the controller, what it does is, it's going to have all that business logic, and it's going to have all those things. And whenever some kind of action is performed, then those will be managed by the controller. It can be even in the form of data going into the database. Supposing if you take the example of our own Edureka's homepage, so you have a login page and you also have a sign up button, right? So whenever you sign up for the first time, it'll ask you for details like your name, your email address, and your phone number. So the moment you give those details, you put those in those data fields, and then when you click on submit, then that data goes into Edureka's database. Now, if you want me to divide that example, what you see on the website, so you will see our courses on one side, and then on the side you will have a sign up button. Okay, now those are the view aspect. That is what you get to see. Okay, and then the different fields there which are corresponding to the name, email address, and phone number, those are also the different fields. Okay, but when you enter details there and when you click on submit, there's some kind of trigger that happens, right? When you click on submit, the data which you enter in those fields, it goes to the database. Now, this action, it is called as the trigger, or for our example, let's say controller. There's some kind of logic that is involved over here. So based on that logic, the data goes into our database, right? So such things need to be controlled, and that is what is controller's role in the MVC architecture. So we have something similar in Salesforce also. So Salesforce, it's all about handling a lot of data, right? So as users, you'll be putting in a lot of data into the databases. You'll be saving hundreds and thousands of records each and every day. So inserting and putting the records and committing them, saving them, it's all controlled by your controller. So that is what is the role of controller. And then you have the model. So model is basically, you can refer to the model as the database of your entire system. Now, I was talking about the details here. In supposing you sign up on the Edureka page, you have the name, email address, and the other details. So those details, where do they go? They go to the database. Now, the model is the database aspect. So if you look at Salesforce in particular, for model, we have something called as standard objects and we have custom objects. What are these? I'm pretty sure you must know these things because this developer video is dedicated to those people who have an intention to become a Salesforce developer. So I hope most of you know what standard objects and custom objects are, right? So if you guys don't know, then we'll have a different session altogether and we'll discuss about these things, okay? But for those of you who know, I'm just going to revise this whole concept. So objects are basically your database records, right? So when I'm saying that Salesforce is all about adding records to the database, what I mean is you will have one customer details. So if we say one record of one customer, then the details that will be there in that record are the name, the email address of that person, the phone number, the address. So all these things will make up one record, okay? Now these records will be stored in objects. So that's why we refer to them as object databases. So whatever data, whatever record you're saving, that will be stored in objects, okay? And they will be stored in the form of records. Now, even these records have multiple divisions, right? So I told you that we have different fields like first name, last name, email address, phone number. So these are 4 different things. And these 4 different data fields can be categorized or can be said to be fields. So there's a keyword called fields in Salesforce. So we, again, for every object, we have standard fields and we have custom fields. You know, for standard objects, you will have standard fields. You can add your own custom fields. But for custom objects, you'll have to create your own fields because, of course, right, it's there in the name itself. When you say custom objects, it's an object that you are building. So if you're building a new object on your own, then you have to define the fields that will be present in that object. So that is the Salesforce equivalent of, you know, model. And we'll have standard objects and custom objects. And basically, we'll be interacting with these 2 things most of the time to update our records or to, you know, to perform transactions with our database. Now, when it comes to viewing part of Salesforce, we have Visualforce pages and components, and we have standard pages. Okay. Now, Visualforce pages and components, these are those pages with which you as developers would be building. So you might have heard a lot about, you know, the standard pages, right? So even an administrator can work on standard pages. So Salesforce have built the standard page already. So they have their own force.com platform, right? So force.com, which is the PaaS layer, that is what you see on that force.com. That is what is the standard page. So you will get, you know, options like fields and you know, objects where you can enter records. You will see different tabs like home, contacts, accounts, opportunities. All those things all come under standard pages. Okay. And your Visualforce pages and components are those things which you will create on your own. And these are some things that cannot be created by administrators. Okay. You know, you need developer skills. You need coding skills in Apex to build your own Visualforce pages. Of course, it's not going to be too tough, but yeah, you can do it. And so I will give you an introduction to that. I will show you how that's done in today's session. And so that was the view aspect of Salesforce. And when it comes to controller, we have again standard controller and custom controllers. So these are just basically other controllers which will link you with the different objects in the Salesforce database in the force.com. So in our case, in today's example, I will be showing you the controllers with respect to objects like contacts and accounts and opportunities. Okay, so it might still be a little unclear for you people. That's absolutely fine. But overall, going into the session, you will understand more and more. Okay, and during the session, if you all have any problem, do put that in the chat box and I will reply to them at the earliest. Okay. Now let me go to the next slide. So here we have the differences between the declarative and the programmatic features of Salesforce. Now, before I give you any more details or talk about this slide, let me go to the force.com platform and show you the different objects and fields and relationships, just for those people who don't really know much about Salesforce. Okay, so it's going to take me like 2 minutes. So I'm just going to run through those things so that this will also help you in relating to the previous slide. Okay, to the different Visualforce pages and components, you know, the standard objects, custom objects. So yeah, it's just going to help you there. So let me just quickly do that. Okay. Okay, so to go to my force.com, let me first log in. Okay. Okay, so I'm into my force.com homepage. Now, let me just give you an introduction here. So what you see here, right? This is your tab, okay? And you have links to various objects. So campaigns, leads, accounts, objects, contacts, opportunities, all these things are different objects, okay? So you can have your own data stored on them separately. So the leads will probably have a list of, all the potential customers that your company can get hold of, and your contacts are all your contacts. So I don't have any details filled right now, but yeah, so that's the kind of details that will be inside here, because this is basically a platform, it's more like a CRM, right? So you will be able to manage all your customer data on this platform. Okay, so that's the introduction that you might need. So first of all, inside all these objects, you can add your own data. Okay, now this is an object called leads. Okay, now I can add the details of the lead. Supposing the lead's name is something, so I can just give anything here, and then I can give the last name, the company he belongs to, the title, all these things. Okay, so I can add all these details. I can save. So when I do save, then all these will be stored as one single record. So let me show you an example. Let's say the first name of someone is Mike, okay, and the last name is John, and the company he works for, let's say, is Facebook. Okay, because these are in red, it means that they are compulsory fields. Okay, so I'm putting something there, but anyways, I will let's say I'm going to enter the field here. Okay, and let's say this is going to be developer. Okay, and lead source, I'm going to choose the lead source as a partner referral. These are just details I'm just putting in. Okay, the number, I'm going to give it this, and let's say the lead status is working, contacted. Okay, and I'm going to save this. Okay, when I do this, there's a new lead created. Okay, the lead's name is Mike John, the same detail that I created. Okay, so I'm going to access the leads tab again. So from the tab, you can see there's one record. Okay, so his name is your first and last names, the company he works for, and the phone number. Okay, and again, these are details that I created, and this is how the Salesforce CRM works. Now, as developers, what you would need to do is add records and add multiple such data. And it's not going to be just small data. It's going to be big data, right? You'll be having to transfer and insert almost 200, 300 records, probably even 10,000 records and 1 million records at a time. So for all these things, it's ideal not to do this manually. Okay, so you can write a code, write a program for all these things and get such things automated. So that's what we're going to work on, right? And how can we work on those things? We can do that by creating our own custom objects, custom fields, or even these objects. We can get the data to get inserted automatically by using our code. Okay, to write our code, we can do it through 3 different ways in Salesforce. Okay, one, we can do it through the Salesforce developer console. So to access the developer console, then you should click on your name here, and under that you have the option of developer console. So you click on that, directly the window opens where you can start coding. Okay, so this was the sample program that I created earlier. Okay, so I'm just going to delete it for now, and I can write my code in here, and also I can create a new class. Or let's say if I go to new, then I have options to create new Apex class, Apex trigger, Visualforce page, Visualforce component. So all these things, I will give you a brief about all these things later during the session. Okay, for now I just want to give you an idea about how the interface looks like. So the second way you can build your own Visualforce pages and Apex codes are by going to this notepad. Okay, so you have a notepad type option in Salesforce. So that is under develop, and then you can choose any of these options here. Supposing you want to create an Apex class, then you can click on Apex class, otherwise Apex triggers or something else. So when I click on Apex class, I get this one, right? So these are the different classes that I already created. But if I want to create a new one, then I can just click on new, and here we go. So I can start entering my Apex class over here. So I can say public class and all those things. I can start writing my class in here. Okay, so this is the second way. This is called the notepad editor. The first one I spoke about was the developer console, the option for which was here. And the third part, which is my favorite and on which I would be working on, is the inline editor. Okay, so the advantage with the inline editor is that you can make changes in real time and see the changes being reflected on the page. How do you do that? By straight away going to the Visualforce page. Okay, to create that Visualforce page and to access that page, then you got to click on first you got to click on home page, and from here you need to change the URL. Okay, so you can see that there's a /home.jsp, right? So I'm going to delete this part and say apex/. whatever your Visualforce page name is. Okay, so previously I created a Visualforce page called my app. Okay, so I'm going to enter that detail and just show you how the Visualforce page looks like. So when I click on that and enter, so I get this page. Okay, so this was the Visualforce page that I created earlier, and you can have your own text in here. You can say welcome to Edureka, and this is your new page, and all these things. You can have your own image. You can also have a background image. You can customize the page the way you like. And then the best part is, in a very simple way, I set up this whole form tab. Okay, so this is very similar to the sign up tab that you get in the Edureka homepage, right? So you have fields where you can enter your name. I can enter my name here. I can put my email address here, say blah blah blah, and then I can also choose the lead source. I could have even had the option of phone number or other things, but for my convenience, I just put these three fields, and then there's a submit option and a cancel option. So when I click a submit option, the details that are present here will go into my database, right? So in my case, when I say my database, it'll go into my force.com Salesforce app, because this Visualforce page is created on my Salesforce org. The details will go into my force.com. Okay, so if I do the enter here, you'll find the details in under the contacts tab. Right, I will show you all these things later. I will show it to you in detail, but now I just want to give you an overview of how things look like. So I think we can go back to our slides now, and I can continue with my session. Okay, so this is where I left off earlier, right? There's this declarative part and the programmatic part. So when you say declarative and programmatic parts, there are three different divisions. Okay, similar to the MVC style. There is one is a user interface, which is with respect to the view aspect. Then you have the business logic, which is with respect to the controller aspect, and then you have the data model aspect. Okay, now this is the place where the data is stored. Okay, this is with respect to the model. So when it comes to declarative parts, you have page layouts and record types. Now if you remember, on the force.com page, I showed you different tabs, right? I showed you the tabs where you can access different objects, and then inside those different objects, you have different contacts that are visible. You have different records that are visible. You have other things. So when you say page layouts and record types, you can customize all those things. You can customize the way they look, and you can move things around, and you can all do those things without the need for coding. Okay, so these are things that can be done by administrators and consultants. But when it comes to programming and when it comes to developers, you can do it via the programmatic options. Okay, you can do things which are not possible through the declarative options. Okay, so some things are not possible by programmatic, but possible only through declarative. Okay, but there are also some other concepts which can be done only through programmatic and not through declarative way. So there are advantages in both ways, and that's why it's important to know both the programmatic and the declarative aspects of Salesforce. Okay, so when it comes to programmatic options, you have the Visualforce pages and you have the Visualforce components. Now I showed you how my Visualforce page looks like, and then you saw different components in there, right? So those things I developed by writing code for that. I couldn't have done that by using the force.com platform. I couldn't have moved around components. I couldn't have put any image there. So when it comes to declarative, it's only about getting the data into the database. I'm restricted to options of how the screen looks like. So to make it more interactive, to make it more interesting, I can have my own Visualforce pages, and I can customize things. So that is a part of programs, and that's what as a developer you'll be chipping in. Okay, so that is with respect to the user interface. And when it comes to business logic, you'll be writing logic, and you can control how things work. You can control the workflows, all those things by using the declarative options of workflow, validation roles, and approval processes. Okay, when I say workflow, what it means is that when action A happens, then there is some kind of trigger that causes action B to happen. Okay, so it can be anything. So let's say in a real-time example, if I'm adding some kind of lead status to my database, or if I say that this person is a lead from this company, okay, I'm going to enter the company detail as Facebook. Then when I do that, then not just a lead is created, but also there's a record under the object called accounts. Okay, in that accounts tab, there'll be a record created saying what is the account name. So when we say account name, there is the company that a particular lead is from. So account is basically the name of the company, and if a single person whose record was just updated or inserted into the database, if his name is XYZ, and if he works for the company called Facebook, then under the objects tab, his details will be added. Okay, and also to the accounts tab, his company name will be added. Okay, and his company details will be added. So that is what you can do. So that is what workflow is. So when action A happens, there's also another action B that happens. So and how does it happen? There's a trigger that works. So that is what is workflow. So I'm pretty sure you all understand what workflow is. And if you guys have any problem, do drop in, because I haven't seen any comments or I haven't got any question from you all. So I'm guessing it's all fine. So I'm just rushing in here. All right. And then, declarative concepts also include that of validation rules. So what do you mean by validation rules? When someone enters data into the database, right? So we were talking about the Edureka example earlier. We were telling how a person signs up into the Edureka page. You'll have login option, where you'll be asked for the name, you'll be asked for the email address, and you'll be asked for the phone number. Now, if any of those fields have mismatched data, supposing in the place of email I have a name and the text there is not in the form of an email, or if in the phone field there is no phone number, you're just putting a bogus value of some text, then it's incorrect, right? So we have something called as validation rules, which will check if the data that is coming in is actually valid. So we can do such things. And then you can also do approval process. So approval process, again, very similar to workflow. So these are the things that you can do with the declarative part. Okay, you can also do it via programmatic part, and when we do it via programs, it's going to be in the form of Apex triggers, Apex controllers, and Apex classes. So like I said earlier, we have triggers, controllers, classes. All this will be written in the Apex language, and they will work on your Visualforce pages and to automate various stuff. And these pages will get the updated value when you perform some kind of action, when you respond to some kind of action on the Visualforce page, then something else gets triggered. So you can also do it via programs, and that's what these are. So using the Apex triggers, controllers, and classes, you can write your programs to achieve the same thing. So if through workflow you're having one guy to become your lead, and also you're getting his company name to be added in the accounts object, then you can do the same thing via Apex triggers. You can write a code for that. So you can do it in a customized way, right? So that is what is with respect to the business logic. And then when it comes to data model, from the declarative options, we have objects, fields, and relationships. So I told you what are objects. I explained that an object will have multiple records, and each record will have multiple fields. So those are the same things, right? So you can create objects, you can create fields, you can have multiple fields, you can create custom objects, all those things. And you can also have relationships. What relationships is that you'll be creating links between objects. So the example of account can be taken for this. I told you that when you create a new lead, and not just the data is going to be added into the lead object, but also his company name is going to be added to the accounts object. Okay, now that's because there's a relationship there, because these objects are related in one way or the other. So there'll be certain fields which will be common between one or more objects. So in our example, basically the account name is a common relationship between two different objects, leads and accounts. So for that one particular person, his account name is going to be Facebook in the leads object, and that particular account name is going to be referenced to in the accounts object. Okay, so that is what is relationship, and you can create all those things using the declarative forms, and it's not really easy to define relationships via the programmatic option. Okay, but via the programmatic way, you have something called, you have REST API, bulk API, and metadata API, right? So with REST API, you have other functionalities. With the REST API, you can add data into the database records. With bulk API, you can add bulk data. You can add almost 1,000, 10,000 records all at the same time. You can actually add more number of records at the same time, right? So adding so many records at the same time is not possible via the declarative option. Okay, but there again, the concept of relationships, it's not easy to define relationships via the programmatic option, right? So I told you relationships are, it's very easy to create them in using the declarative way. Okay, but in the programmatic way, it's not easy to define relationships. So that is what the data model is, and I've spoken about the differences, and I've told you how important it is to know both the declarative and the programmatic way and the programmatic model of Salesforce. Okay, and today's session is going to be dedicated to this aspect, right? How to write better programs. So those things. Now moving on to the next slide. So this is one slide which will help you understand what I just spoke earlier. Okay, so I told you that there'll be customers or clients or other colleagues of yours will be using the Salesforce application, right? So they will be here, and what they will get access to is the Salesforce Visualforce page using the cloud. Okay, so we have a cloud-like structure here. This is basically representing the internet, and what they will see using the internet is your Visualforce page, where you will redirect them to. And on this Visualforce page, they can add the details, they can click on something, and whatever action they basically perform, those will be triggered, and the data will go into the database. Okay, and the data going into the database, or other kind of web service calls happening, these will be defined by the application logic. Okay, so this is where the controller aspect comes in, and this is where the power of Apex comes in. Okay, so Visualforce is all about creating a good Visualforce page, like how we have HTML and CSS developers and who are in big demand, who basically design websites and beautify the websites and web pages. So that is them. And then you have the application logic, who will be the backend developers, will be working on multiple things. So similarly in Apex we have that option. So we can control if the data is going to go into the database, or if it's some kind of click, are we going to redirect that person? So basically whatever transaction happens on that page, whatever action the user makes on that page, those will be controlled by the application logic. Okay, and that's where Apex comes in. That's why Apex is very important, guys. So it's really important you understand this image, because if you understand this image, you will know how Salesforce works. You know how Visualforce pages are defined. You know how Apex. You know what is the role of Visualforce. You will know what is the role of Apex. You will know all these things, and it's a little easier for you to relate to things, and you can get started by just understanding this whole image. So I suppose it's all fine. You guys have all understood everything here, and I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about Visualforce in detail. So as you can see, Visualforce is highlighted here, and this section is going to be all about Visualforce. What is Visualforce? What can be done? How to create your own Visualforce page? How to add other details in there. So I'll be discussing all these things. I'll give you a demonstration of Visualforce here. Okay. Now, before I do all those things, let me tell you where to use Visualforce. Okay, guys, tell me, can I ask you a question? Now that I've told you so many details, where do you think Visualforce can be used? Okay, it's pretty obvious from the slide that it can be used in email templates, it can be used in mobile interfaces, right? So it can be used to generate PDFs, all these things. So basically you can have emails and you can have Visualforce page links in the emails, create all these things. Then since Salesforce One app has a lot of usage, because many applications are being used on mobiles, right? And there's a lot of demand for Visualforce pages being present on the mobile too. So to create a similar experience that a person gets on the web, to get a similar experience on the mobile, there's a demand, and there's an option and a chance to create such Visualforce pages for the mobiles, right? And then when it comes to PDFs, you can create PDFs, as in you can all these Visualforce pages, right? You can generate PDFs of those Visualforce pages. And then when it comes to embedding in the page layout, this is what I told you earlier. Okay, so you will have standard pages which will be very similar to what is there on the force.com platform. Now to those things, you can embed a Visualforce page, you can add links, you can get them to view those Visualforce pages from there. And then the most important thing is that the pages override. Okay, now this is one important thing, or let's say this is a very good functionality, because by default when administrators are using the declarative option, when they go to a particular tab and under a particular object in the tab, if they click on that and if they're trying to insert a new record, okay, they're adding a new contact, okay, that time they will be adding the name, email, and the phone number, all those things in the traditional way. And when I say traditional way, it is the standard Salesforce page which is visible, and they will be adding details manually. Okay, but those things can be changed. I can create my own Visualforce page. For adding a new contact, I can design my own Visualforce page, add my own fields over there. I can make my own set of fields compulsory, all those things. And whatever Visualforce page is created, I can make that as a default one. So even if there are administrators or other people who are using that particular object to add details, then what they will get to see is my Visualforce page instead of the standard Salesforce page. Okay, so that is what we mean by saying pages override. Your Visualforce page will be basically overriding. It will be basically overriding the Salesforce standard page. So that is that. And then you can also add custom tabs. You can create Visualforce pages and create custom tabs for those Visualforce pages. So these are the different places where you can use Visualforce. All right. So moving on, I'm going to quickly define Visualforce, and after this I'll get to my demonstration. Okay. So the definition is that Visualforce is a framework that allows developers to build sophisticated custom user interfaces that can be hosted natively on the force.com platform. Okay, now this is the same as what I told earlier, right? So I told the same thing, that you can create your own user interfaces, you can customize those things and get them to see what you want them to see. Okay, if you see this image here, this is an example of a Visualforce page. Okay, it looks very similar to a standard page, but it's not quite the same. There's a lot of difference, because if you see this image, there are two different blocks here. Okay, now this is one part of the page and this is another part of this Visualforce page. Okay, on the top part you have something called your account owners. Okay, and then there are two fields, account name and owner. Okay, there are two different fields, and the list of records present in that object is all listed here. Okay, and this is created by using this Apex code. Okay, so we have this tag called Apex data table. So when you say data table, then records and data, it's represented in the form of this kind of a data table, and we'll have all those details. And similarly, you have another page block here. In this block of the page, you have something called as list. Okay, you have records of multiple people. So by using the tag Apex::enhanced list, what happens is all the records that fall under a particular list, they will all be displayed. Okay, so all the fields like action, account name, account site, billing, state province, phone number, and then the owner alias, all these things are available in this page block. Okay, this is all done by writing simple 3-4 line codes in Apex. And the first tag that is used is the Apex enhanced list. So under this tag, I write a 3 to 4 line code to get all the details here. And similarly, for getting all these details, I write the code under this tag, Apex::data table. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but the tag that you see here, right, Apex::page. So this is the main tag. So you create your Apex coding language by starting with this, and to also end that be a code, then you finish it with /Apex::page. Right, so I will talk about the syntax. I will give you a detailed explanation in some more time, but I'm just giving you an idea of how things work. Okay, so this is basically a Visualforce page, and this is how the different page blocks are. You can have different components on different parts of the page. You can also define how big that Visualforce page is. So those things, and on top that you see here, right, the contacts, opportunities, forecasts, all these things, they are objects and they are appearing as tabs. Now, if I'm a developer, then I have an option to disable this tab. Okay, so this is something called as header. So if I set a header to false, then this part will not be visible. So other users or other clients of mine, when they are on my Visualforce page, they will not get to see this. They will only get to see what is there here. Now I will show you how to disable those things when I do my demonstrations. Okay, so that was the basic example and introduction that I want to give about Visualforce. So Visualforce page again consists of two primary elements. One is the Visualforce markup and the Visualforce controller. Okay, so in the next slide I have the difference between the two. When I say Visualforce markup, I'm referring to the Visualforce tags, the HTML tags, and the JavaScript, or any other web-enabled code. Okay, and all these things are embedded within the single Apex page tag. So basically all my data, all right, whatever contacts that I'm defining, whatever rules I'm defining, all those things basically make up my markup. Okay, and this basically, it defines the user interface components as it's said here. So that is the Visualforce markup, all right, where you can define the user interface components. And then when it comes to controllers, this is the main part. Okay, so you have all your HTML tags and all those things inside the markup, but how they work, okay, what are the objects that this data will refer to, where the data will go to, which object the data that is entered will be inserted into, all those things will be controlled by the Visualforce controllers. So as the definition says, it's a set of instructions that specify what happens when a user interacts with the components. All right, provide access to the data that should be displayed in a page. So that's what it means. This basically controls how the different components interact with one another and with the user. Okay, when I explain the demonstration, you will get a better idea of all these things. Okay, so going to my next slide, I have an example of, I have a sample code here. So as it says, Apex::page. Okay, this is the tag that I have to give to open my page, and at the end of the code I will also have Apex page, but it will be prefixed with this backslash. Very similar to HTML, and in fact very similar to .NET, all these things. So people who work on HTML, CSS, they'll all relate to this very easily. Okay, and within my page tag, I can have details like the title, and give the title of my page, and then I have the option of controller over here. Okay, when I say controller is equal to my controller, I can have my object name here. I can say what is the object that is being referred to in this code. Supposing this is a code which involves adding data to my database, and then I can define the various fields over here. I can write code for defining the fields, and to point to the particular object the data will go into, I can put the object name over here. So that is the role of controller. Okay, so this is all part of the Visualforce markup, and this is the Visualforce controller which will be defining where the data will go into. All right, so that is it. And to just give you an example, you have simple tags, right? H1 tag, H2 tags, and then you have paragraph tags. So basically whatever's present right here, these three lines is what will be appearing on your Visualforce page. This first line, this will be appearing as it is. The text over here, this is the heading. Okay, now this, since it is inside the H1 tags, this will be having a slightly different font. Maybe it will be bolded, or it will be slightly bigger, things like that. And when we say P, it means that this line or whatever is there inside this tags is going to be in the form of paragraph. So the font again is going to be different for this one compared to these two lines. So this is how a simple Visualforce page is built. Okay, and yeah, so I've explained all these things. So I said this is the end tag, this is the start tag, and what you say apex here, right? So that is the component namespace. These are the tag attributes. These are the values of those particular tags, and then the controller name with respect to my object. It can be a contacts or accounts or anything like that. And then this is the basic text that I want to display on my web page. So at the end of the day, it's all going to be my Visualforce page. All right. All right, before I go further, let me show you a quick demonstration of this code. Okay, let me create a Visualforce page on my Forge.com platform and show you how simple it is to play around with the developer console. So I'm going back to my Forge.com. So, okay, so first of all, let me go to this one. Okay, so this is the URL of my home page. So basically, to create my own Visualforce page, I can do it by going to setup. Under build, we have develop, and under develop, I can go to Visualforce pages. Okay, it's right here. So when I click on this, I have the list of my Visualforce pages. Okay, this is the one which I showed you earlier. And to create a new Visualforce page, I can just click on new here. Okay, so I can do something like this, and this is how the coding looks like. I can start entering my code. You have a default template here. Okay, so that's the good thing. Right, so this is one way, and alternatively I can also do it via the inline editor that I spoke about, where you can see the changes in real time, whatever changes you make to the code. Okay, so I'll just cancel this and show you how that is done. So I'm going to open the Apex page. So let's say Apex slash the name of the application, or the name I want to give to my Visualforce page. Any suggestions, guys, from the audience? Any particular name that you all want me to give to this page? Okay, so let me just say demo page. Okay, so when I say demo page, it initially says there's a Visualforce error. Demo page does not exist. Haha. So there's a funny comment here from one of our participants. He says Edureka rocks. Yeah, it does rock. So anyways, let me have given the name already. So this is going to be the name of my Visualforce page. Okay, and let me just create that page anyways. So I'm going to click on this create page demo page. Okay, when I do this, this is going to be the name of my Visualforce page, and as you can see, it says congratulations, this is your new page, demo page. Okay, the page is created already. So I can edit the texture, I can do all that by going to my inline editor. Okay, so for that you will see an option on the bottom right over here. Okay, so let me just highlight that. So as you all can see here, there's this arrow option on the right. If I click on that, the editor will open. All right, so I'm going to click on this part, and when I do that, the place where I have my code, that is written. So for this code, this is what is the output. Let me increase the font here. Okay, I hope it's all visible to you all now. So as you can see over here, the word congratulations is under the H1 tag. Okay, so that is why it's a little bolded over here. Okay, the other sentence is not. Okay, because that is not inside any tags, it's just text straight away. So let's play around and let's do something different here. I'm gonna just remove this part because that's just a random comment. And you should have noticed that there's an Apex page starting tag and the page ending tag is already there. I just need to edit details inside. Okay, so I'm gonna say, instead of congratulations, let's say welcome to Edureka webinar on Salesforce developer, right? So this is more like a real-time example or a real-time page that I'm creating. Okay, so if you all have any other suggestions, please do tell me, because I am open to suggestions. But in the meanwhile, let's just say this is going to be under my h1 tag, and then in the next line I'm going to say the instructor name is Vardhan. Okay, now I'll put this in the next line, and this I can add say a bold tag, right? So when I put this under this B tag, it means this whole sentence is going to be bolded. Okay, let me put the ending tag for B. It's very similar to HTML and CSS, right? So this is done, and I can also make things underlined. And okay, now before I do all those things, let me just quickly show you the output. Okay, and even getting the output is similar. So as I told you, a real-time output. So what I mean is, by just saving this code, you'll see the changes over here. Okay, so you have the save option here. When I click on save, the whole interface changes, right? So you have welcome to Edureka webinar on Salesforce developer, and immediately you have this sentence, the instructor name is Vardhan. So this was the change I made now. It doesn't look that good. So what I'll do is I'm going to put a full stop over here, and still it's not going to look good because this is in the same line. So what I'll do is I'll put that in the next line. To give a line break or a space break, we need to give the tag BR. Okay, and when I save this, this comes to the next line. Fun, right? So let's give another break statement just for clarity purpose, and I'm going to give another break statement even before that. Okay, so if I save this, this is how it looks like, right? So there's another thing that I'll do. What I'll do is the instructor name that you see here, instead of making it bold, I can do something more fun. What I'll do is my name, I will make it underlined. Okay, so the tag is this. So when I put a full stop and when I save this, this is how it looks like. Awesome, right? So this is the name, and my name is underlined, and this is the other text. This is your new page. In fact, I can even remove this because this is not what I entered. So instead of this, I can have something. I can have something else, but So this is how simple creating your own Visualforce page is, guys. What I'll do now is I will add another functionality here. Okay, instead of just saying this is your new page, let me add an option to display the person's name who's logged on automatically. Okay, so in my case, I am the one that is logged on, right? So I'll write a code such that Apex picks up my name from this user account. Okay, the name I'm logged in here is with Vardhan. All right, that's my first name, and I'll make sure that is what is picked up by writing a code for that. And instead of that, what I'll do is I can write something like your name is colon the name of the code here, the code to get the name, and I can do that by giving code within flower brackets. I have to give exclamation mark, dollar, and user dot first name. Okay, so when I do this, my first name will be picked up from the force.com and it will be displayed. Okay, I have a question here. Does it mean it will take the name from the code of the page or from the Salesforce database? Okay, so I'm having this question from Neil. Okay, so Neil, this name, right? This is with respect to my user. Okay, now to pick my name from the database, then I have to reference one of these objects, because when we say database, the records will be stored in any of these objects. It can be stored either in leads object or campaigns object or accounts object or contacts object. Okay. Now, if I want to pick up details from there, then there's another code that I have to write. Okay, I will show you that in some more time. But for now, what you need to know is currently, when I say user.first name, it means that the currently logged in user. Okay, currently Vardhan NS is logged in. Okay, that's me. So my first name will be displayed. Okay, instead of first name, if I say phone number, then my phone number will be displayed here. It will be displayed somewhere here. When I refresh the page, I'll show you that. Okay, so I'm gonna save this. It's saving. Okay, it says there's an error. Okay, so this is not ampersand, it is dollar. Okay, there was a typo in there, so I'm going to change it to dollar, and if I save it, there you go. There's a change here. Okay, it says the instructor name is Vardhan. Okay, and then it's this. Okay, now to bring more clarity in there, I'm gonna give a line break. Okay, let me give one more line break. Okay, and here I'll give this in bold. Okay guys, so simple. I've brought the sentence to the next line, and now I've made my name as bold. That's all I've done. I can also get my last name over here. Okay, now if I change it to LAST and NAME, so it'll pick this particular user's last name. Now, since I am the user, my name is displayed. Okay, if you access this Visualforce page, okay, from your Salesforce account, so that was the question which Neil asked. Okay, so Neil, if you access this Visualforce page from your force.com account, then this will be the same. Okay, it will say welcome to Edureka webinar on Salesforce developer. It will say the instructor name is Vardhan. But when it comes to this one, your name is colon. What will appear over here is your first name. Okay, so Neil, supposing if your first name in the Salesforce org is NEEL, then that is what will appear over here. It won't appear as NS. Okay, so that is the simple logic that I've written here. Very simple and yet very exciting, right? So yeah, great. Okay, thanks. I got it. That's what Neil says. So yeah, it's so simple. And let me show you more things with respect to this one. Okay, what I'll do is I will add an image over here. Okay, let's open a random image from Google. Okay, I'm gonna just Google images. I'll go to this tab. So I can pick any image from here. Okay, what I'll do is let me choose some landscape image. Okay, so I'm gonna choose this because it's I like this a lot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the image address and not the link address. Okay, there's an option of link address, but I made this mistake when I was developing this application. I used to copy link address. I copied the URL of this image and then I put that in my code. Okay, so that was showing me an error. I couldn't get the image, and then I later realized that I need to copy the image address. Okay, so I'm just giving you people a heads up. If you want to do something like that, say copy image address. Now go back to your code and put it right here. The code for that is so apex tag, and you should say image. Okay, then give space, say URL equal to, and sorry, there was a typo there, and inside double colon I give the image address, I paste the link, and then I have to close this tag. Okay, so I've done this, and if I save it, okay, so the page is still loading, and yeah, as you can see, the image is visible here. Awesome, right? So I'll just hit my code for a second. So this is my image, and okay, your name is NS. This comes below that. Okay, maybe I've given the code above that line. So yeah, so I've given the image URL above my name. So what I will do is I will take this code, I will put it below this line. Okay, and I will change the image dimensions. I can change the height, I can change the width, I can control how big this image is going to be. Okay, so that power I have. So this is all styling components or styling aspects of Salesforce. So I can just define the size by reducing the pixel. I can say width is equal to 100 pixel or 200 pixel, all those things. So first let me adjust the height by giving height is equal to and inside double quotes, let's say 100. Okay, and let's give the width as somewhere around 50%. It's not going to be proper, but anyways, let's just figure it out. Okay, the page is still loading, and there you go. So this is the page. The image has become a little too small. Let's adjust the image now. Okay, now let's increase the height to 300 and increase the width by another 50%. Okay, so when I give this and when I save it, this is what appears. Okay, so now the width is not that great. So what I'll do is I can make it 75% and see how good that looks. Okay, in fact, I will also give a break statement after this, just so it appears in the next line. So when I save it, it appears like this. Okay, it's still a little wider, but yeah, it's good enough for my demonstration purpose. I think basically you know, right, how things work. You can just adjust your own height, you can just adjust your own width, you can do all these things. Okay, so any doubts, guys? So any problems? Are you all having fun? So yeah, Neil says he's having fun. Great. And I'm also getting an answer from a couple more people. Okay, so this session is going to be a little more longer, right? The webinar has just started now, and this is just the Visualforce aspect. After this, I'll have to cover the Apex aspect, and then have to talk about the test cases and exceptions. So it's going to be pretty long, but you're going to have a lot of fun, guys. Okay, so for now, I will close the Visualforce page. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to let it be, and get back to my slides. Okay, guys, I'm going to get back to my slides for now, and I'm going to get started with Apex. So Apex, right? Apex is the one in which you can do the coding. So whatever I wrote, it was in the Apex language. And let's get into details. I'm going to talk about these other things. This again should recognize this from the previous slides. So we've highlighted Apex here, and this is the part where we are going to concentrate on right now. And where do you use Apex? Okay, and when to use Apex? You can use Apex programming language to add custom logic to your application, like web and email services, complex validation, transactional logic, complex business processes, logic to operations like saving a record, and basically everywhere. All right. So this Apex is basically the code that controls whatever you want your people to see. If you want your customers to see an image, then it's going to be Apex, right? So I gave the image URL in the form of Apex code, right? I gave the Apex tag, and then I gave the URL there. I gave the image address. So that's what I mean when we say web services. Okay. And then when it comes to transactional logic, I can define code such that data gets saved into my database, and I can verify all those things. Now, me verifying those things will come under the concept of complex validation and the transactional logic, right? So the very action of saving those records to my database, that is a transactional logic, okay? And the complex business process that you see here, when we say complex business processes, it means that the other things, the other actions that are triggered when one transaction happens, or when particular action happens. So if one lead is added to my database, then automatically account is also created. I told you how earlier. And when that particular lead gets converted, then he gets added to the contacts, right? He is no more lead. When he's converted, he becomes my contact. So the action or the trigger that happens when a person turns from a lead to a contact, right? Now those all come under complex business processes. So you can define such kind of business processes. You can do that by using your own logic, by creating for loops, if conditions, all those things. Okay, and then even the data that's being stored into the database, you can validate those things, and you can add a logic to the operations. You can write a logic such that you can verify if the data that's getting stored is correct, and if some kind of a particular data is getting stored, then what are the other triggers that should happen, right? So to give you an example, let's say I'm adding an opportunity, okay, and if I add the opportunity amount as 3,000, then I can have a particular logic. So supposing if the opportunity name that I'm going to add, if it's between 1,000 to 2,000, I need one kind of trigger, okay, and if the opportunity amount is somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000, then I want a different trigger and a different set of messages that need to be displayed. So these are two different conditions, right? So these two things can be played around with by using my logic. So when this new contract is being added, when the new field is getting updated, and when the detail in that field, that is the amount, is between a particular bandwidth, then I can write my own code and my own logic for that particular amount. So that is the power of Apex, okay? So basically, as a developer, Apex is what you work on. So as long as you're good in Apex, you're going to be a fantastic Salesforce developer. All right, guys? So enough talk, and moving on to the next slide. I have a sample Apex program here, okay? This is a little more advanced to what I wrote, and right now I'm not going to be writing this program and showing you how it works, because like I told you, it's a little advanced. So I just want to show you the different aspects of a programming code, okay? So similar to any programming language like your Java or your C++ or your Python, you have all those things here, okay? You have the for loop statements. You can create your own for loops. You have SQL queries, right? So I'm not sure if everyone knows that, but Salesforce supports SQL queries. So we have something called as SOQL, okay, which stands for Salesforce Object Query Language. And then we have something called as SOSL, that is Salesforce Object Search Language. Okay, so what it means is that from your database you can have such queries, and you can basically query your database. You can find out, you can retrieve data, and you can search that data, all those things, right? So querying will be with respect to the SOQL aspect, and searching that data would be with respect to the SOSL part of Salesforce, right? You can do those things. And then you have control flow statements. So you have an if loop here, right? You have an if condition. If this condition is not equal to null and this object size is greater than 0, then this will be executed, otherwise it won't, right? And you're updating something here. So this is a DML statement, data manipulation language statement, which is respect to insert, delete, update. So all these things come under this. So as you can see, when you just look at this image and when you just look at the different codes, right, the different lines, there are different things that you can do, right? You can do looping, you can define your variables very similar to how we do it in Java. In fact, it is the very same, right? So it's a little complicated here because we are defining a list. Okay, so list is something new, which is in Apex. So now you might find it a little confusing, but to again create a new class or to define an object in Salesforce, it's very similar to Java. You should define the class name, space, the name of the object you're giving is equal to, then you have the keyword new followed by the class name, right? So you do the same way even in Java. So it's very simple. Apex is very simple to learn, especially for those from programming background, and those who are not from programming background. I mean, it's just going to be a little bit of effort, and if you put in that effort, I think you'll learn programming and you will do well in Apex. Okay, let me just run through this again. So I'm having a new class here. The class name is my first Apex class, and then I have a list account. Okay, so basically when we say list, it means that a number of records are going to be retrieved and put in one list. Okay, so one list can have many records. So instead of having to retrieve multiple records separately, I can have I can create one list and get all those records to be inserted into this list. Okay, and I can retrieve that list as a whole, and I can view that in my console later. So I'll show you how that is done. Okay, so to just give you an idea of how things are, I'm going to run through this code. So we have list account. So the account here is the name of the object. So I'm retrieving these details from the accounts object in my Salesforce org, and this is the name that I'm giving to my account. And I'm going to say select ID, name, and description from account object. Okay, which I defined here from account, where the name is similar to, is like test. Okay, so when we have a text inside this, it means that whatever name is there which is having the characters TEST, those should be retrieved. Okay, so and this line is all about how a variable is declared, right? So to create a new variable, you just need to give a list. Similarly, just give the account name. You have the name of the variable here, and then you say new, and then list within that the object name. So it's very similar. The difference between these two lines is just that there's an SQL query over here, but instead I'm defining an object over here. I'm defining a variable here. Okay, that's the only difference. So otherwise it's still the same. And then I'm opening a for loop in which I'm going to store all these records. So for every description that's being added to my object, I'll say this account for testing, and then I'll add the objects in there. I'll close the for loop and all these things. So it's all pretty simple and pretty obvious. So I'm not going to go through the entire code because I'll write something similar to this later. Now moving on, programming in Apex. Okay, so this is the main topic for today. Now before I show you how Apex codes, to show you more functionalities with the Apex code and show you the different languages, I'm going to go through these basics, right, which you have in any programming language. So in Salesforce, it's just I'm going to brief you about all these things. Okay, so first of all, let me talk about the primitive data types and variables. All right, so Apex supports these data types. They are blob, boolean, date, date time, decibel, double, ID, integer, long, object, string, time. So it's all pretty obvious, right? So it's very simple data types that will be supported by the other different programming languages, right? Maybe blob is something one of you doesn't know. So blob means your the data will basically be in the form of binary data, right? So your binary data will be stored as object. So that's what blob means. And Boolean, you all must know what Boolean is. Date, it'll be in date format. So variables can be stored in the form of date, time, or decimal format, double, ID, integer, long, object, string. So we'll mostly be using string and integer for my examples. By default, I'll be using that. Okay. So to give you an example, you can have, is sunny is the variable that will be created. The data type will be a Boolean, and Boolean is going to be either true or false, right? So you're going to store the data as equal to true. Or if it's double, then you can have the variable name. You can give the value of the variable to be 3.1417, right? So that is the data type of double, and then the data type of ID is this. So by default, all the contact IDs or the lead IDs or all those things will have an ID that is associated, right? And that ID will be in this format. So basically all the IDs, right, which are there in Salesforce, supposing there's a new lead that's getting created, or there is a new account that's getting created, or a new contact, then in that object there will be an option of ID. Okay, and that ID will be only in this format. Okay, now this is very specific to Salesforce. All right, so that's why we are defining this ID variable name, and the data type will be ID in caps, and this is the format it will be in. So that is it. And integer, similar, this will be the variable name is equal to 1. So these are very simple things, and I'm pretty sure you all know this. So I'm just going to quickly go on to the next slide and talk about things that matter more. So SObjects, okay. So let's read the definition here, okay. SObject refers to any object that can be stored in the database. So what does that mean? Okay, so this is what I told you earlier. So any object that can be stored in the database. When we say that, anything like contacts, leads, opportunities, all those are objects, okay. Those are stored in my database. I can even create my own objects. So supposing I want to create an object for some application, and I want to store the details of all my employees, okay, all my fellow colleagues in my company. Then I can create a new object. Say the object name is employees in my organization. That can be the name of my object. And then I can have my own fields, okay. So all these objects can be stored in the database basically. And when we say SObjects, these are the standard objects, okay. Now what I will be creating, that is a custom object. So the object that I was talking about, right, the employee or my colleagues, so that which I will create is going to be done by me. So that is referred to as a custom object. But when we say SObjects, we refer to standard objects, and standard objects are those objects that are standard in Salesforce. Okay, so the example of SObjects are accounts, opportunities, all those things which you see on the tab over there on the top. That when I showed you earlier, when I showed you myforce.com, all those tabs that you saw, right? So SObjects refer to those objects which are inbuilt in Salesforce. And it says an SObject variable represents a row of data. Yeah, so I explained that also earlier. So to give you a few examples, creating an account object is simple again. So you define the object name as account, you give the variable a, and then the keyword new, and then the class name or the object name, right? That's simple. So creating a custom object, if you want to create your own object using Salesforce, so using the declarative way by going to force.com is very simple. Okay, you have an option there which says under build, you have the option of create, and under create you have option to create new objects, new custom objects. Okay, but if you want to do it in the programmatic way through Apex, then you can give this syntax. You can say my custom object _c, because in Salesforce when we are defining custom objects, they will be suffixed with _c. Okay, so this is _c, and you will be giving the variable name here, then is equal to new, again my custom object _c. So the only change is the object name. So the object name will not have any suffix in case of a standard object, but in case of a custom object, you will have a _c. Okay, so that is with respect to creating a custom object. But if you want to create an object with values, okay, so at the same time when you're defining this object, if you also want to create values or add records, right, and add them into that object, then you can simply do it by choosing the name here. So you can say account A is equal to new account, and then in brackets you give the object name, sorry, you give the field name over here. Okay, so first name or last name or simply name, these are the different fields in this object account. Okay, so if I'm not wrong, in this object called account, there's no first name, last name. Okay, so since account refers to companies, there will be only name. Okay, there will be only one field, that is name. And when we say name is equal to in single inverted commas, if you have Acme, then it means that this company name will be added, and the building city will be added as San Francisco. Okay, now what I'll do is I will show you a demonstration on the developer console. All right, so let me go to my force.com first. So now that I'm here, this is my Visualforce page. What I'll do is I'm going to let this be, and instead I'll go back to my force.com and I have to go to my developer console. Okay, I can write my Apex code over there. So my developer console is available here, and it's open in a new window. Okay, so guys, this is the developer console. All right, and to create a new class, you can just click on File and say New Apex Class. Okay, then it'll ask you for the class name, and then you can give the name of the class. Supposing I'm going to create an application to check the addition of two numbers. Okay, I'm going to say the class name is add. Okay, and in fact, let me give this as the class name. Okay, class add. Okay, so my new class will be created, public class, and this is the name of the class that I had given. But before me writing any code inside this, let me show you one more advantage that you have with the developer console. Okay, so instead of having to get your syntax correct all the time, instead of having to get your code totally perfect all the time, you have an option to just check your logic. Okay, here I don't need to give the class name and stuff. Okay, and that logic you can find it over here. Okay, under debug you have this option of open execute anonymous window. All right, so when I click on this, there's a new window that opens. So in here I can just check the logic of the code. Okay, I don't need to enter anything else. I don't need to enter the class name or the method name and all those things. I can just check if my actual logic, right, where I'm defining the different variables and I'm saying add these two numbers, I just need to enter all those things. So let me show you an example first. Okay, so I'm going to define the three variables, a comma b comma c semicolon, and I'm going to say let's give the a is equal to 48 and b is equal to 4, right? And then in the next line, let me give c is equal to a plus b. Okay, so this is ideally the logic of my program where I want to add two numbers and store it in a different variable. All right, so this one, if I click on execute, and when you see the status here as success, it means that the logic is completely fine. All right, I have not yet opened the log. Okay, so whenever you execute anything from the anonymous window, that result will get stored in here. So as you can see, let me just maximize this window for you. All right, bring it on top. Okay, so previously when I executed this code by just clicking on this thing, the logic executed successfully. Okay, had there been a problem here, the status here would have been incorrect or maybe something else. So let's just check also, okay, if it's actually getting what happens if your logic fails. Now if I say execute, okay, I get an error. It says line 3 column 1 variable does not exist. See, that's because I deleted that variable, right? So I deleted C from here. So that is why I did not get any success here. But previously when I executed this, I get a message something like this. All right, this is your console, and here you will get options like logs, test, checkpoints, query editor, view state, progress, and problems. Okay, so if there's any problem in your code, then those will be visible over here. All right, and whatever tests you run or whatever code you execute, those logs will be generated over here. Okay, so similarly, let me execute it once again and show you the whole concept. Okay, so when I execute this, there was a new log that was generated, right? I was the user that created this, and I created some time back, and the status reads as success and the log is unread. So if I click on this, then further logs will be read here. Okay, but of course there will be nothing present. So what we need to do is we need to go back to the anonymous window and say system.debug. Okay, now the system.debug is something very similar to how system.println works in Java, okay, or system.printf in C++ or in C. So what the system debug will do is I can say the sum is, and I can concatenate it with my variable. So the variable that I want to display is C. All right, and if I put a semicolon here and if I execute this, then I have a new log that is generated. Can you see? It says unread, success, and it was created just now. When I double click on this, the new log gets opened over here. Okay, so this is that new log. This was the previous log. I'm going to close the previous one. So this is the new one, and all the log details are here. Okay, if I want to see my output, then I have to just click on debug only. All right, so when you click on debug only, then your result will come. So if you see my anonymous window, the values I gave for A and B was 48 and 4. So under debug only, I have the answer. So it says the sum is 52, because this is the statement that I had put up in the anonymous window. All right, I said system.debug, and I wanted my output to be displayed in this way. So this gets executed successfully, and that's how this was generated. And this basically means that my logic is fine. All right, now I can execute this logic or implement this logic in any of my classes. Now the important part would be to implement this logic in a class. Now I'm going to copy this old code, and I'm going to create a new class. Or let's say I can add that to the existing class that I created earlier. So this is the class that I created, right? Class add. So the logic that I tested, I'm going to put it here. And to make things better, what I need to do is I'm going to create integer. I'm going to define this globally, but I'm going to create a new method. All right. Inside my new method, I will define these variables A, B, and I'll define the logic for C and even the printing statement. I'll put this under a new method. Okay. So to define a new method, what I need to do is I need to give public void sum. So similar to Java, there's the syntax to create a new method, and inside this brackets I can have this code. All right, so when I'm done with this, basically now my code is ready. So I have a code, I have a method inside my class where I have this code which will be executed inside my method, and if I call this method from outside, then this execution will be successful. Now let's see how that is done. Okay, now I'll go back to my anonymous window, and here I'm going to call this method that I created here. Okay, so the method I created here was sum, right? So I have to basically call that class over here, and I'll do that by calling the class name, and that is class add. I'm going to say C equal to new class name. All right. And now, since this is my object name, I'll give my object name dot method name. So that is sum. All right. So now that I've added this code, so now my code should be working fine. So let me execute this, and yeah, a new log is generated and it says success. So if I go here and if I click on debug only, I get the sum, that is 52. All right. So this was again newly created. All right, it was not the previous output, because there are a number of logs that have been generated in the meanwhile, because every time you press Ctrl S, when you save the code, it gets generated. So last time when I created this anonymous window, when I added the code there, when I called the method over there, this is the log that was generated. So guys, that's how simple it is to write Apex code. It's very similar to Java, and you shouldn't be having many problems. All right, so now that I've done with this, let me go back to my slides for a brief while. I'll talk about Apex for some more time, and then I'll get back to the demonstration. Okay, so going back to my slides, we spoke about SObjects. So now let's talk about collections. So Apex basically has these three types of collections. Okay, one is list, the other one is set, and the other one is map. When we say list, it is something which is very similar to array. Okay, you have a number of fields, all right, and a set of these fields or a set of these records, you just have them indexed starting from 0. Okay, and this is the syntax for defining a new list. Okay, so this will be the name of your variable, and you'll say list, and you will give the data type. You can be either string or integer. So after list, you define the data type, and then you give the variable name. You say new, and then you define the list name again. All right, and then you close it. So similarly for set, you don't have any index, all right, but what set does is that you can just store data straight away. Supposing you have details like Delhi, LA, Paris, Rome, and Goa. These are name of cities, right? So you can just add them straight away, but they will not be indexed in any way. So that is the difference between sets and list. So it's going to be the records or the fields that are going to be stored anyways, but these things will not be indexed. That is the difference with respect to list. Okay, and now when it comes to maps, as you can see, there are options like US, and then you have dollar. All right, so the currency that's followed in US, that is dollar. With India, it is rupee. In the UK, it is pound, and similarly we have for the other countries. Now the difference for map with respect to the other two is that maps go with respect to key value pairs. Okay, so we have two fields. So whatever value is stored, it will be stored with respect to the key value pair. So this is considered as the key, and this is considered as the value. So there'll be a value for this key, you will have one particular value, all right, and then for another key you'll have another value. So that is why there is no question of indexing. There is something called as US. So for US the answer will be dollar, and for India it will be rupee, and things like that. Okay, because it follows the model of key and value pair. So that is about collections, and three different types of collections, where we have list, we have set, and we have map. Okay guys, so moving on, I'm going to talk about the DMLs and the different data operations that can be done with these records on the database. All right, so to add the data or the records to the database, you can use the insert command or the update command. Okay, in fact you can even use the upsert command. So with the insert command, whatever data you give, right, supposing I give Ramesh, Bangalore, then these will be entered into my database. So assuming that initially this database was null, it was empty, and then when I give the insert command with these values, then they will be entered into the database. So as you can see, Ramesh Bangalore, Rohit Hyderabad, Rahul Delhi, Samir Mumbai. So these are the details that are added to the new database. All right, and then we have the update command. So when it comes to update, we will have our data here, and then that will be updated to the existing records. So supposing Ramesh's record and Rohit's record is already there in the database, but they have to be updated, then you can use the update command in that situation. Okay, so initially the value for Ramesh was Bangalore. Okay, but with the update command, if we use Ramesh, Mumbai, then his details will be updated to Mumbai, right? So in the database, the place will be updated. Same thing for Rohit also. If you see in the previous slide, when we did the insert command, Rohit was from Hyderabad. Okay, his place was Hyderabad, so as per his record here. But if you look at his record after the update command, it has been updated to Chennai, while there has been no change for the other two, for Rahul and Samir. So similarly, if you do the delete command, so when you do a delete command, whatever records you choose, they will get deleted, they will get eliminated. Like for example, if we say delete Samir and Rahul, then from the database they are completely non-existent. Okay, as you can see, they were present here, Rahul and Samir, but their records are non-existent after performing the delete operation. And then we have the upsert command. So I mean, you might probably recognize what upsert is by just the name, right? So it's update plus insert. So the concept here is that if the record is already existing, then that record will be updated. But if the record is not existing, then the new record will be created. Okay, so currently we had only these two records. Okay, we had Ramesh Mumbai and Rohit Chennai. All right, now with this database, what we are doing is we are updating Rohit Delhi. So we have Rohit who's from Chennai. Okay, that is our existing content in the database. So when we say Rohit, Delhi, Rohit was initially from Chennai. This record has been updated to Delhi. Okay, and when it comes to Rahul from Chennai, there's no entry for Rahul, right? So this is a new entry has to be created for this. So that will be added here. So this database here will be modified to Rahul, Chennai, where this will be appended to the existing database. So that is about different commands that we have. You know, the different DML operations. These are the 4 primary DML operations. But besides these 4 commands, we have merge and undelete. Okay, so we have these 2 operations too. But anyways, I'm going to move on to the next topic now, SOQL and SOSL. Earlier I told you what they stand for. So SOQL stands for Salesforce Object Query Language, and SOSL stands for Salesforce Object Search Language. Now the insert, delete, update and upsert commands, so these functions can be performed only if you run some queries initially, right? So you have your database, then you have to retrieve some data from there. Only then you can perform any operations like insert, delete or update. Okay, so for that purpose, I'm going to give you a brief about these 2 sets of Salesforce features. Okay, so these SOQL statements can be basically used to query your database. If you want to retrieve a particular record from your entire database, then you can use the SOQL statements. And if in case you want to search the existing database, then with the help of SObject list, then you can retrieve those database. So you have the syntax right here. Okay, so for SOQL, it's you give the keyword list, and then you can give the object name. You have the variable name, and then you give the query language, right? Whatever query you want to do. You want to say select ID and name from the object account where the name is a particular name. So, supposing if I give the name Vardhan here, okay, if I give my name, then from my account, wherever the letters Vardhan appear, those records will be retrieved. And those records will be retrieved and ID and name will be displayed. So similarly, the same thing for SOSL. But SOSL, what happens here is the data will be searched for and then they'll be retrieved. Okay. So that is the importance of SOQL and SOSL, because any modifications or any updations cannot be done to the database without these. So whether it's insert or whether you're deleting something, they can be done only after you use your SOQL. So now that I've given you an introduction to the DML statements, let me go on and show you a demonstration. Okay, so let me open the developer console. So basically, let me show you how these queries can be performed. Okay, so let's say I want to first add a particular record to my contacts object. Okay, so I'm going to call that object first. Okay, contact. I'm going to give the variable C and say new contact. Then I'm going to choose this variable and add the first name. Okay, so for that I'll do C dot first name, and in brackets I'm going to give the first name as anything. I can give the name as Michael. Okay, it's so simple. So when I say C dot first name, it means that this object that I'm referring to, for that object the first name is Michael. Okay, now if I do C dot last name and it's equal to Oliver, then the last name for this particular object will be Oliver. So I can add a few more fields like this, because first name is a field, last name is a separate field. Like that, I can add a couple of more fields like email address, phone number, all these things, and I can do an insert, right? So let me show you some more things. Let me add the email also. Okay, so I'm gonna say C dot email, and in brackets let's say his name is mo@gmail.com. okay, so now let me do an insert. Okay, I'm going to do insert C, because the object which will have the first name, last name, and the email details, this will be inserted to the record now. So now that I've inserted that, let me do a system.debug to display the output. Okay, I'm going to say ID is generated as. Okay, I'm going to concatenate this with C dot ID. Now what ID basically is that when a particular record is added, okay, his first name, his last name, and his email address, when it's added, he will be also getting an additional ID. So this ID is specific to only Salesforce. All right, every record is differentiated and identified uniquely with the help of this ID. Because this ID will be created, let me display his ID name for my reference. Okay, now that I've added this code here, let me say execute. Okay, there's an error in line 4. Okay, I'm missing a semicolon. Okay, now let me execute it again, and I'm getting an updated log. Okay, it says success. So let me view this log, and when I click on debug only, I'm getting the new ID name here. ID is generated as this one. All right, so what I can do is I can also verify if this actually happened. I can go back to my force.com salesforce.org and check if I have actually got an updated contact with that name. Okay, so I'm going back to my objects in contacts. As you can see, there's a new contact which was recently added, right? And his name is Michael Oliver, and I had given the email address as mo@gmail.com, and this was added. Correct? So that's how insertions work, guys. Now, to show you, to prove the existence of this code, let me do one more thing. Okay, if you noticed over here, there was, if I try to edit it, it says last name is compulsory, right? So when it says last name is compulsory, then I cannot add or create a new contact without the last name. Now, if I start editing my code such that there is no last name in there, then it should throw an error that the contact has not been added because last name field is missing. Only the first name and the email address field is present. So let me show you that kind of possibility also. All right. So let me go back to my developer console, and in my developer console, I'm gonna remove this part. Okay. I'm gonna remove this, and now if I execute it, pretty sure it's going to throw an error. And yeah, so it says insert has failed because the required field is missing. What is the required field? It is last name. Okay, so that's how insertions are done, and that's how things are validated. So before insert, such things are checked, and if the transaction is going to be a failure, then such error messages are thrown. So that was about the contacts. Now that I've done this, let me show you another example of how a list is created. Okay, I actually spoke about lists in a couple of slides earlier. Now I'm going to show you a demonstration of those lists, how to create a list, how to add different records to that list, and those things. So for declaring a list, what you got to do is you got to specify list and the data type and whatever variable name you want to give. So I'll give colors, okay, because I'm going to show you an example of adding colors to here. And then I'll say new list string. All right, this is the syntax. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add different records to this list. Supposing I have different colors like yellow, blue, red, I'm going to add those to this. Okay, now how can I do that? I can do it by giving colors.add or colors.insert. Okay, so let me do that. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call that list, and I'm going to say add in bracket and semicolon. Similarly, if you want to add another color, then I'm gonna again, I can use the same command and just replace blue with red. Okay, now if I do an execute here, it says success. Okay, now let me read this log and check for debug. Okay, so it does not show any result here because I did not added the system.debug command. Now let me add that. That was a little silly of me. I'm going to do a system debug so that I can print the values. Let me say the list size first. Okay, so I'm going to concatenate this, and to determine the size of the list, I have to call the variable again, colors.size. Right, and then what I'll do is now I will display those colors, the contents. So the list contents are, right guys. Okay, now let me execute this. Okay, the new log is created, it's added successfully. Now if I go to debug only and see the result, it gives me two answers, right? So it first says the list size is 2 because I've added two colors, blue and red, and I'm getting the list contents are these two because these are the two fields that I added to my list. These are the two records that I added to my list. Now let me go another step further and talk about the concept of duplication in list, because after this I'll talk about maps and I'll talk about sets. Okay, because records cannot be duplicated in sets. I will show you how duplication happens in a list, and accordingly I'll show you that, you know, something similar to that when you try doing it in sets, it will fail. Okay, so if I have this, let me take the same command red. I want to add this again, and then I'm going to execute this. So I'm getting a success, it's created again. I go here, when I open it in debug only, you can see that the list size now is 3. Okay, that's because there's blue, red and red. So I added 3 colors. So that is what you can do with list. So if you go back to the slides, I can show you that they are differentiated with index, right? So for list, for every index you can have a different color, so there's no problem in there being duplication. But whereas you cannot do that in sets. Let me show you why it's not possible in sets. If I open my developer console and if I replace list with set, so wherever there is list, I'm going to replace that with set. Okay, I'm gonna say set string color is equal to new set string. Let's add blue. I'm gonna delete this for now. Replace this with the set sizes and the set contents are. And when I execute this, again it's a success. When I try to view this and go to debug only, you see that it says the set size is 2. Okay, the set contents are blue and red. But now will come the difference. Now let's say I'm going to have a duplicate content here. Okay, I'm going to say colors.add, and again I'm going to add red, okay, to the existing list. When I execute this, it will fail. Or okay, it's not fail, it says success, but I'm pretty sure the list will not have all the 3 contents. So see, like I told you, even though I have added 3 different values, I added blue, red and red, it says that the list size is only 2 and the coordinates are only blue and red. That is because the duplicated value was not considered at all. So that is what happens with set. So the difference between list and set is what I've told you now. It is that the duplicated value will not be inserted and you will just be shown the output straight away. So maps, on the other hand, they work with a key value pair. All right, and these key value pairs, they can be either string or they can be integer or they can be anything. So that is what is map. And to add details to a map, then you can either use map.add or map.put. So when you use any of these, then you can get your value into that map. So guys, that was with respect to how records are added to the list. Okay, so we tried inserting them, and I also showed you how to add details to other maps and how to add records to set, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to query them. Okay, supposing I want to extract some records from the existing object. How do I do that? What command do I run? So even that is with respect to list and with respect to the existing objects that I have in my Salesforce org. So what I'll do is I'll go to my force.com developer org and go back to my console. Okay, now I'm going to write a code where I retrieve records from my contacts. Okay, so I'm going to delete this and say list contact. This is my existing object, and I'm going to enter my query here. So I spoke about this syntax earlier, right? So I explained the syntax earlier. So it is select ID, comma, email, comma, first name and last name, comma, phone. I think that would do. I'm going to just extract these 3 things from my contacts. Okay. So let me just verify the syntax, show you it is the same thing which I explained earlier. As you can see, I used the same syntax where I said list. Here it's account. However, I've chosen contacts object, and then I've given a different variable name, and then I've used a similar query. I've said select ID. Here it's just ID and name, but I've given first name, last name, and all those things from my contacts object. All right. Okay. So now let me give system.debug, and here let me just say the size is okay. I'm going to concatenate this with plus symbol, and since the variable name is con, I'm going to say con dot size. Okay, so using this query I'll retrieve all my records and I'll put this into my con variable, and the size of the con will be retrieved in this command. Okay, now to display each and every record that is retrieved, what I can do is I can run a for loop such that for contact f colon con, and inside here let me display each and every record as and when it's being generated. So if there are around 100 contacts inside that contact object, then by creating one for loop, I'll write a code such that it prints the contact number. Okay, and then it will increment, and then the next contact will be displayed and printed. So something like that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a system.debug. I'm going to say details of the contact are. I'm going to concatenate this with now since I'm starting that with F, what I'll do is let me say f dot first name and f dot last name and f dot phone number. So I can do that, right? So f dot first name, I'm gonna concatenate this, sorry, let me give some space and concatenate this again with f dot last name. All right, in fact I can have my phone number also right over here. Let's say phone number, and when I concatenate, let me say f dot mobile or f dot phone, any one will do because both are going to retrieve some kind of number details, right? So that is this command. Yeah, I think that would do. My code is ready. Now what I can do is I can execute this code. When I execute, it says, okay, line 1, column 21. There's an error. Okay, so I think I know the problem here. So let me just change the name here. And if I execute it now, it should work, yes. And seems like it's successful. And let me see that, open the log. And when I check on debug only, I have all the list of all the contacts. So it says the size is 21. So there are 21 contacts in my object, and it starts from this. Details of the contacts are first name, last name, and the phone number. Okay. In fact, I can even give space or page break so that things become more clear. But anyways, those are things which you can do on yourself. But these are the basic things that you should know, right? So how you can get details from the database, and you can retrieve all those things using the DML operations, using the SOQL operations. How you insert details or records into the database using the DML operations. So things like this. So that's it about my demo for the DML commands and my SOQL commands. So let me go back to my slides. So go to the next topic, that is triggers, governor limits, and DMLs. All right. Now, as you can see here, the definition of trigger is given. Okay, let's read that out. Apex triggers enable you to perform custom actions before or after changes to Salesforce records. Now, this is the same definition that I even gave you earlier. So what triggers are? They are basically a code that will be executed before or after a particular action is performed on your database, right? The example I gave you earlier was that of Visualforce pages, right? On the Visualforce pages or on any login page, when you click on submit button, some kind of operations will be performed, checking if the details you provided were correct. Like if the details you provided in the email ID field, was it correct? Was the details that you provided in the phone field, is that correct? Because there's a good chance that you put bogus data inside the phone field. Okay, you put a text in the phone field, and in the email address field also, if you don't give an email address which is in the form of if it's in the actual email format, then it's all wrong, bogus data, right? So we can have triggers to verify and validate such details, and before that data gets in, we can verify that, and even after data gets into the database, we can verify certain things, we can validate certain things. So such are the times when triggers are very useful. Okay, so it's basically used for verification and validation, and also for workflows and process automations. Now I'll give you an example of all those things, but before that, let me just talk about the different triggers. Okay, so basically we have triggers for insert, update, and delete, and we can have these triggers either before or after. So that means we can have triggers like before insert, after insert, before update, after update, before delete, after delete, and then you have undelete, right? So but for undelete, the only trigger is after undelete. There is no before undelete, because undelete means you're actually going to undelete something which is there in your recycle bin. Supposing you've already deleted some object or a record, then that one, if you want to bring it back to your database from your recycle bin, that time is when you use undelete. So only after you undelete, you can have some process, you can have a trigger, because before undeleting, there's no point in even having a trigger, right? So that is about the undelete. And then the other triggers are also merge and upsert. So of course we don't have a before merge and after merge, or before upsert or after upsert, but basically the before and after triggers are primarily for insert, update, delete, and for undelete. And talking about the order of execution of triggers, so let's consider this stage first, okay? The record being saved, because this is the point when you would have finished entering details into either your validation pages or your registration pages, and you'll have to insert triggers. So you either insert triggers before this point or after this point. If it's before this point, you'll have a set of triggers which will run, and it will do some system validation rules. So like I said, it'll check for the different email address fields or the phone fields if all that is fine, or if it will check if there is enough space in the memory heap, all those things. So all such triggers can be invoked. And after the record is saved, you can invoke the after trigger. And with the after trigger, after you have actually added the data to your database, you can have some assignment rules. When we say assignment rules, what we mean is when a lead is automatically created, then that particular lead has to be assigned to some sales representative, right? He needs to be contacted. Otherwise, he's just going to be a lead and he's never going to get converted into a customer. So that's why we need assignment rules. So as and when a new lead is added to your object, you have some kind of rules such that that particular lead is assigned to a particular person. So that's what assignment rules does. So in general, if you're having some kind of record being added to a database, you'll have to have some other action that's being performed. So that is assignment rules. And then when it comes to auto response rules, this is again something which is similar to assignment rules. If you want me to give you an example of leads, then when a new lead is added, then you can have auto response rules via email to case or web to case. So what these two, email to case and web to case, essentially mean is that when you say email to case, it means there'll be an automated email that will go to that particular lead saying thank you for checking out our so and so thing, or thank you for registering or signing up to our website, so things like that. So that is the kind of auto response that goes, that is through email to case. Okay, that's called email to case. And then the other one is web to case. Supposing you don't want to send a custom email to that particular person, then what you can do is you can have a web to case response such that when a person clicks on signs up and when his data is added successfully, then you can get that person to see a web page. On the web page, you will be displaying some message saying thank you for trusting in our company, and then thank you for registering for our services. So things like that. So that is what auto response rules mean. And then you have workflow rules. So again, workflow rules was something I discussed earlier. Again, just a set of actions that triggers other actions, right? So these are the order of execution of the different triggers. So guys, that is about the order of execution of triggers. All right. Now let me quickly go to my developer console and show you a quick demonstration. Okay, I'll show you how triggers are created and how we can execute them. In fact, I'll not be going to my developer console. I'll actually be doing it from inmyforce.com. Okay, so because it's easier to just create triggers over there and implement them. All right. So if you want to create a new trigger, then once you're in your force.com, what you got to do is scroll down under the build option. You have customize, right? So under customize, you can choose any of the objects on which you want to create the trigger for. All right, because the records are going to be stored inside these objects, and whenever these records are being added to these objects, that time these triggers will be invoked. All right. So for my demonstration, what I'm going to do is I am going to go and show you a demonstration on the opportunities object, because this is one object which I did not show you any demonstration on. I showed you one on account, I showed you one on contacts. So I'm going to go on and show you one in opportunities. Okay. So if you go under opportunities, you have this triggers option, correct? Similarly, even if you want to create a trigger for contact, you will have the option under contacts tab, and for one under activities, or for campaigns, or for leads, you'll all have it under those drop down. I'm sorry. So now let me just go to the trigger under opportunities. Now it currently says that there are no triggers defined. Okay, so I'm going to define a new trigger. I'm going to click on new for that. Okay, so this is how the basic outline is. Okay, this is like a notepad where you can start putting your own code. Okay, so my Apex code that I'm going to write for my trigger is the syntax for writing the trigger is this. All right, and this is going to be the syntax where you have the trigger keyword, and then you have the name of the trigger that you want to give. All right, you give the name here, and then you have this word on. So after on, there is the opportunity keyword. In our context, this is the object, correct? So what this basically means is trigger name on the object name. So that's how the whole outline is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my trigger by giving my trigger name as, let's say, trigger underscore basic, because I intend to show you two different triggers. So the first one I'm going to show is a basic level trigger. It's going to be pretty simple, and it's going to be straightforward. And the other one is going to be a little advanced level. Okay, so for that purpose, I'm going to give the name as trigger underscore basic for this. And yeah, it's going to be on the opportunity object. And the events. So this was what I was talking about earlier. I was telling you about the different triggers, right? The before insert, after insert, before delete, after delete, before update, after update, and there was one more after undelete. So those events are what you need to enter over here, because when any of those actions are performed on the database, then you have this kind of trigger that runs. Okay, so here for my trigger, let's say I am gonna give before insert and before update. Okay, so I don't think I've explained this whole reason why I'm giving before insert and before update. So before I go further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the opportunity tab and show you what kind of demo I'm going to show you. All right. So this is how you create a new opportunity. Okay. From the declarative method, this is where you go and enter details. So you have different options like opportunity name, the account name, then type of opportunity, lead source, amount, close date, next step, and stage, right? So whenever a data or a record is being added to this object, you need to create a trigger. So let's take the example of amount over here. Okay, the actual object name is opportunity and the field name is amount. So whenever you're creating a new opportunity, you also got to put an amount. It's going to be in the form of integers, right? You're going to put either 5,000 or say 6,000 or 8,000. So that's the amount that you put for that particular opportunity. Okay, this is something that will be done by the sales reps or maybe even you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a trigger such that if the opportunity amount is less than a certain number, then that transaction would fail, right? That insert or that update would fail. But if the transaction amount is greater than a particular number, say above 500 rupees or $500, then that particular transaction would be a success. So I'm going to take that kind of an example and show you something like that. Okay, so right now I wouldn't have any problem to enter the amount because there are no triggers defined now. So let me also show you one demonstration. So I'm just going to quickly give the opportunity name as I'm just going to give the name Edureka underscore customer 1. Okay, I'm going to say the account number, account name. Okay, the only available account name here is Google, so I'm going to give Google. Okay, now even though this is not the actual relation, or even though things are incorrect here, I'm just going to give Google because we're just assuming this particular Edureka customer is someone who works for Google. Okay, I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to choose type as existing customer and replacement. I'm going to say the lead source as web and the amount, okay, as 500. Okay, and I'm going to say the close date as this one. I have chosen all these things. This is the only compulsory field left, and I'm going to say negotiation or review that's going on. So what now if I save this, note that this record will get saved to the database. Okay, even though the amount is 500. As you can see, $500 is updated here. The expected revenue is this, and all these details as however I entered, those are saved here. Now this is where my trigger will come into picture. Supposing I did not want such a record to be saved because this is a very less amount. If I did not want this record to be saved in that case, then I can write a trigger such that this transaction would fail, such that an error appears saying, sorry, you will have to enter a different value or you have to enter a greater amount. So something like that. Okay, I'm going to write such a trigger. So let me go back to my trigger program, and here what I'm going to write is I'm going to write a for loop first of all. Okay, I'm going to say for now. Some of you might ask me why I have used new function called trigger.new. Okay, so basically there are two types of triggers, okay, in Salesforce that you can use. One is a trigger.new, okay, and then there is trigger.old. Let me just put this in comments so that you don't get confused. So see, these are two different functions that you got to call when you're creating a trigger program. Let's say instead of saying reason, I'm actually using this for creating a for loop. Now what I'm doing is when I say trigger.new, it means that basically when a new record is being added to the database, it will check those records. Okay, so it will basically create a list of those records, and then I will run my for loop on those set of records and run whatever code I'm gonna write below that. All right, so you guys know how for loop works, right? So if I have some kind of codes over here, then for basically the opportunity object, the variable a, whatever is there in this content, and with respect to what is there in the list that is created by this trigger new. So trigger new will basically have those records which are being inserted newly. Okay, but if I give old, then the list content will be the already existing records and those that are getting updated. Okay, so that is the difference. So if you look at the logic of this program right now, So when I say trigger underscore basic, this is the name of my trigger, and the before insert and before update is what I explained earlier. These will be the right before that particular record is being transactions, before the insert transaction and before the update transaction. This trigger will be invoked, and trigger.new will create a list of all those new records that are being added. Okay, and the for loop will run on that list. Okay, so let me write that code. So since I want my amount to be above a particular value, what I'm going to write is I'm going to write an if statement. I'm going to say if a dot amount, or let's say if a dot amount is less than 501. Okay, because the previous example that I showed you here, I had inserted the opportunity details with an amount of 500. Okay, so for that purpose, I'll try adding the same details again and show you that it won't happen. That's because of a trigger. So for that, I'm going to write my code such that I'm going to say if the amount is less than 501, then it should throw an error. Okay, so the error that will be thrown is amount value should be greater than 500. Okay guys, now so I have that inside my for loop, and I have an if statement which will check the amount that's being added. If the amount is less than 501, then it will throw this error. Okay, so when I say a.add error, it's just another method that I'm calling which will show an error on top of the screen here. So whenever the person is adding the record here, it will show transaction failure or record not saved. Now let me save it. So it's very simple to even save triggers. Okay, if I just click on save, then my trigger is automatically active. So you have this option. So it's pretty visible that your trigger is running. So if I go back to my opportunities object, okay, and now if I try to add an Edureka customer 2 who has the same amount, that's 500, changing it to customer 2, and I'm gonna again choose the account name as Google itself. Okay, and the amount I'm gonna give it as 500. Okay, it is the same. Even the customer 1 had an amount of 500, and even this guy will have the amount of 500. Okay, this is a compulsory field, so I just give this one. Same thing here. I'm going to say negotiation or review, and now if I save it, it will throw me an error. So like I said, error, it says invalid data, right? Amount value should be greater than 500. So this was the same comment that I had put in my error debug message, correct? So that's how things work. But if the same thing, if I change this value to 5,000, okay, then it will successfully get added. That's because it's greater than 500. So as you can see, there's no error this time. It's all added, and I'll have two new opportunities now. Two new opportunities are Edureka underscore customer 1 and Edureka underscore customer 2. And this was an already existing opportunity of mine. So that's a basic example of how trigger works. I hope everyone is clear. Mayank, any doubt? Or Neil, any doubt? No. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, this is a simple type of a trigger that I showed you. Another complicated or an advanced example of trigger is what I'm going to show you next. Okay, so for that I have to again go back to my triggers under opportunities. So this trigger, what I'm going to do here is, because I want it to be a little advanced, I'm going to make sure that when I create a new contact or when I create a new opportunity, a contact is also triggered. Okay, I'm going to write a trigger such that when one record is being added to my contact or my opportunity object, okay, so at that time this trigger will be invoked such that a new record is added to even my contacts object. All right, let me just highlight that and explain it once again for those of you who weren't clear. So I was saying, in this trigger example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a trigger such that when a new record is being added to my opportunities, okay, at that time, then a new that particular record will also be added to my contacts object. Sounds good? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write my program. I'm going to give it the name trigger underscore advanced, and the name is going to be trigger. I'm going to change the spelling. I have a wrong spelling here. Trigger underscore advanced on the opportunity object, and the event is that after insert. So after a record is inserted to my opportunity object, I want this trigger to be invoked. So I have opportunity object here, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new object variable. I'm going to say contact C is equal to new contact, and I'm going to create a for loop similar to how I created last time. Okay, so I'll give a different variable this time. I'm going to give it I'm going to give f and colon, and after that I'm going to say trigger.new, because this again is going to be a new record that's going to get added to my database, right? So that's why it's trigger.new again. And now that okay, there won't be a semicolon here. I'm sorry about that. So I'm just going to close this for loop here, and I'm going to open the loop. And inside my for loop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the account objects. Okay, first of all, every contact or every opportunity that I create, it will also have an ID, right? So a new ID will be created. So I will take that same ID and I will assign the new contact that I'm creating. I'll assign that contact that particular ID. Okay, so let me explain that also, because I'm not sure if few people understood what I said. So we have different objects called accounts, contacts, and opportunities. Correct. So when I create a new opportunity, there will be a new account that will be created. Okay. All right. Now inside my for loop, I will have my code where I will be creating details for even my contact. Okay. So I'll be creating a record for even my contact from what is generated in my opportunity. Okay. So the thing is, so as I was saying earlier, when there's a new record that is added to opportunities, we will have to have a new record added to contacts, right? So I will write code such that, the contact gets created, but how will I do that? So I will have to also link it, because I cannot create a new contact altogether, right? I have to create that particular contact details only. So what I'm going to do for that purpose is, when I create the opportunity, even his account will be created, correct? So there will be an account ID that will be associated with that particular opportunity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that account ID, and with that account ID I'm going to create a contact. Okay, I'm going to give the same account ID into the contact object. I'm going to enter that account ID, and so when I do that, along with that account ID, I can create the first name, last name, and the other email address, phone number, and all those details about that particular contact. So I'm basically going to use the account ID that will be created, and using that I'll be adding the other details for that particular contact. So make sense, guys? I'm going to just write the code for the same, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say, since I've created the object for contact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say c.accountID is equal to o.accountID. Okay, and then c.lastname is equal to, I can give any last name that I want. So let's say I want to give him the name Steve Jobs. So I'm going to say Steve, and then c.firstname is equal to Jobs. Okay, so I think Jobs will come here in the place of last name, and then in the first name I'm going to give Steve. All right, guys, I forgot the semicolon here. And these are the details. So the account ID is taken from the contact object. Basically, the account ID for the contact object is taken from the account ID in the opportunity object. And then for that same contact, I'm also going to give the last name as Jobs, first name as Steve, and I can also give my phone number and all those things if needed. So I don't need to do all that for now, because last name is the only compulsory field, so I've given that. So this record will be created. Now, the important thing is I need to give the command insert C, okay, because all these details will be associated with this variable object. Okay, so when I say insert C, and when I save this code, this trigger will be created. Okay, there's an error at line 6. Okay, so I know what the mistake is. So what I've done is I've created opportunity with F, okay, and whereas here I've given o.accountID, so I'm going to say F because the opportunity object is referenced with the F variable. So I'm going to do the same thing, and now I'm going to save this. Now it should all work fine. So now that my code is ready, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my opportunities object and add a new opportunity. Okay, and I'll show you that there'll be a new account created for that particular opportunity. So when I'm going to give the opportunity name as, let's say Edureka underscore customer 3, okay, and the account name. So for our purpose, I'm going to create a new account name altogether. Okay, I don't want to use Google, so I'm going to say I want to create a new account, and let me say the account name this time is TCS. Okay, and I don't think anything else is compulsory. So when I do this and I do save, I can have my account name here, and I don't need to enter all these things because they're not compulsory. So I'm going to give the amount to be 4000, and then I'm going to close the date, and that's going to be this, the stage as negotiation or review. Okay, so once I'm done with these things, I'm going to save it. Okay, so now that it's saved, now what I can do is I can go back to this particular account and show you that there's been a new object that's created for that. So this was the new contact that I created, right? Through the opportunity, I created this TCS account, correct? So when I added Edureka underscore customer 3 to the opportunity object, that time I wrote a trigger such that the contact name Steve Jobs gets added to this particular object, to the accounts object. So that's how we are. So it says there's a new contact, and that is Steve Jobs. I hope you guys are clear with what I just did here. So can I get an answer from you all? So seems like it's all fine. So that is it about this particular demonstration of trigger. Now I'm going to go back to my slides and talk about governor limits next. Okay. If you look at the definition, it says Apex runtime engine strictly enforces limits to ensure that the Apex code or processes don't monopolize the shared resources. Okay. Now what this means is that you all have limits on what you can do on the Salesforce org, because it's all on the cloud and it's not your database, right? So there's a limit because one particular database will be shared by multiple clients. There's a limit on how much one particular client can use, right? In the shared database, maybe only 10% of that database might belong to one particular client, or just actually even 10% is a very big number. Maybe just 1% of that database belongs to one particular client, and if that client is exceeding the data that he's storing in his database, then he'll have to be notified. So that is what a governor limit typically is. Yeah, that is the exact definition of governor limits, that you're monopolizing your shared resources. Okay, and when it comes to the different governor limits that are there in Salesforce, so these are the most common ones. The per transaction apex limits. Okay, so this is something, when we say that there's a limit on how much your heap memory size can be. It can be only 6 MB of memory. All right, and then another example of this per transaction apex limit is that there can be only 150 statements per DML transaction, right? So when we say DML transaction, one transaction is one particular update or one particular insert that's happening. So for each transaction of that, you can have only 150 statements. That would include all the triggers, before triggers and after triggers and all those things. All right. And then you have other limits, like you can run only 10,000 SQL statements. And then another limit is that you can only retrieve only around 50,000 records per SQL transaction. You cannot retrieve more than that. So those are the different governor limits when it comes to per transaction apex limits. All right. Because per every transaction, you have these limits. In a particular transaction, only certain things can be done. So that is what I spoke about. And then you have Force.com platform apex limits. So when we say Force.com platform apex limits, it may, a classic example of this would be that the objects, they cannot be created using Apex, right? So I initially showed you on the Force.com platform that using the declarative method, you can create custom objects, right? So that thing cannot be done using Apex. And then we have static apex limits. So an example of that would be, there being a size limitation on the Visualforce pages that it should only be up to 132 MB. So that is the static apex limits. But this limit of there being only of the Visualforce page being only 132 MB is something that keeps changing. Okay, so every season it kind of changes. So we have seasonal updates, right? Salesforce release seasonal updates. So with every update, this limit keeps changing. And then when it comes to size specific apex limits, we have this example of there being a maximum number of characters for a class and a maximum number of characters for a trigger, that it is only 1 million. So when it comes to size specific apex limits, we have a limitation that the number of characters for a class and the maximum number of characters for a trigger can be only 1 million, right? So any class that you're writing, then the maximum number of characters in that class can be only 1 million. And even in case of trigger that you're writing, that trigger can only have maximum of 1 million characters. So that's about size specific apex limits. And then when it comes to miscellaneous apex limits, then we have a condition that the default timeout for callouts can be either HTTP requests or web service calls, right? So these timeouts can be a maximum of 10 seconds. So if this transaction is taking more than 10 seconds, then that transaction will just fail. So that is another governor limit that we have. And then when it comes to email limits, there's a limit on the number of emails that can be sent per day. So I think it's around 1,000 per day, and if you want to send more emails per day, you have to pay for more. And then same thing with respect to push notification limits. There's only around 5,000 notifications that you can receive per day, and you can have a queue of 50,000. But yeah, per day you can only view around 5,000 notifications. So those are governor limits. And so if you ask any developer, right, any Salesforce developer would tell you how big a headache governor limits is for him, because you'll have to change the entire way or you code because of these limits, because they bring a lot of problems. They associate with a lot of problems. So it's important that your code adheres to the governor limits. All right. So that is about the governor limits. And in the next slide, I'm going to give you an example of that. So I told you that there's a limit on the number of commits that you can do to your database, right? Supposing you have 1 or 2 commits, then it's fine. You will have a single row, and then you'll be committing that one particular record to the database. That will be successful. There will be record number 2. You commit that is also successful. But what if you have like 1,000, 10,000 records that need to be updated, that need to be inserted at the same time? What will you do? You can't do so much, right? You have a limit on the number of transactions, on the number of inserts or DML operations that you can do in one single day. So those cannot be violated. So for that purpose, what you can do is there's something called as pre-operation step. Okay, that is why the whole concept of collections come into picture. The collection that I spoke about earlier with respect to list, map, and set. All right, so you can add, you can have a number of records, add all of them into one particular collection, either a list or a set, and then commit them all together. So when you do that, then only one single commit is occupied. So you still have a lot of commits that you can do. So your governor limit will be intact and it's maintained. So that is the advantage with the bulk operations, and that is the advantage of using collections in Salesforce. All right. So here we are in our next topic, that is Visualforce and Apex together. Okay, Visualforce and Apex in action. And here I'm going to talk about custom controllers. So I initially gave you an introduction to custom controllers, right? I told you that you have your Visualforce page, and whatever data you have on the Visualforce page, that is all controlled by the Visualforce markup, right? That's called the markup. But how they behave when a user interacts with one of those components, what happens when a user clicks on any link or he inserts any details into that registration field or any web page, what happens? So those things are what are controlled by controllers. Okay, so I did not show you a demonstration of this that time because it would be a little too much, but I think it's time now for me to go back to my Visualforce page, show you how the Visualforce page creation is done, and how to add controllers to it, and how to create page blocks, page sections, and all those things. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Visualforce page, and right, so my Visualforce page, I can access it from here. So this is the Visualforce page, right? /apex/demo page. So I can access it from my home page. And if you can recall, this is what I created earlier. I added this image and this. So to add an Apex controller, I need to go back to my code, and over here, so right next to page, I add the tag standard controller. Okay, and I'm going to say standard controller is equal to contact. Why do I do that? That's because I'm going to show you a demonstration on contact. Okay, let's say I'm going to create a form here. I'm going to create a first name, last name, and a field form. And similar to what I did previously, I will make sure the data you enter over here, it goes into the database. If I've sent contact here, then whatever details I've created here, that will go into the contact object. Okay. So in case instead of contact, if I give opportunity here, then I'll have to have the appropriate fields. Okay. I have to have the opportunity name, account name, those fields, and then that data will go into the opportunity object. Okay. So now let me get started with that. So this was the contact that is written. And there is one more thing which I actually wanted to show you. So this whole thing that is there, right? That's present, that you can see. This is called tabs. You know that. Now, do you really want your folks, your clients, or your customers to see this? Correct? Because you don't want to give them access to all these things. So in your Visualforce page, you only want them to see the text and the image and the form. So I can even customize it that way. I can even hide this thing, okay? And that also I can control it from here, from the page tag itself. And here I'm going to set show header is equal to false. All right, because when I say show header to false, it's more like Boolean and how things work. Whatever's there here, this tab, so this whole thing will be invisible, correct? If it is true, then this would be visible, because by default the show header is set to true, correct? And if I enable it to false manually, then that will not be visible. I'm going to save this code, and when I save it, that is invisible. The whole tab and other related details are invisible, okay? So that's how you design a Visualforce page. Now continuing over here, what I'm going to do next is, after the image, I'm going to create a page block. So I told you that I will create a different page block and I'll have a form, correct? So for creating a form, I'll have to first open a new tag, okay? And the tag name itself is Apex form. So I'm going to say Apex form. I hope you all can see the font size here, and I hope it's big enough for you all to see. So similar to opening one, you'll also have a closing tag for Apex form. So I'm just gonna write off first. Okay. Now in between here, I'm gonna give the page block details, and the form is gonna be inside here. Now that I've given my open tags and close tags for form, I need to put the different fields that I want to be visible. Okay. Supposing I want to have the last name, first name, and email address fields, then I need to define them by putting them into these tags. Okay. So I need to give Apex. I have to say input field, because those will be fields which will take input. Okay. And in fact, F should be capital here. Okay. And value equals, okay, inside brackets I will have exclamation contact dot last name. Without last name I cannot add any record, so that's why I have last name first. So I'm going to close this. All right, this is my input field, and then input field for last name. So for email address, I'm going to have something similar. In fact, I can just copy whatever was there in the previous line. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, and here I'll only change this contact dot email. Okay, and again, if I want another one for phone number, then I can just replace this with dot phone, or anything else, first name or lead source. So it was just an example that I want to give you. So now that I've done this, I can save it. Okay, so it says the end tag syntax was wrong, correct? So I have not given the right syntax, so I'm just giving that here. And when I save it, my Visualforce page is ready, such that I have three fields basically for first name, last name, and in fact I created three fields for last name, email address, and phone, correct? So none of them are visible. So what I need to do is I can create a page block, and I can add a field label to those things. So guys, it doesn't look really great, right? So you have three fields, but you don't know what they are, so you don't have the label. So for this purpose, we can have something called as page block. Okay, when I create a page block, I can say that till here was the other details, and from here there's going to be one page form, or some details into which it's basically some details are going to be there. So when I show you an example of that, you will get a better idea. So I'm going to add the page block. It's basically just dividing the whole page into one block, into which you can have your own other details, customized details. So to define your page block, you will define it inside the form tag. So in here, I'm going to create a new Apex page block. Okay. So this end tag will be after my field details. Okay. So just before my form gets over, so I'll have that here. Or first, let me save this page block, okay, and show you what is the difference. It looks better, right? Better than before. So you have three different fields, and you can see that there is one compulsory field. Since logically our last name is a compulsory field, you know that this is the last name, and this will be the email address and phone number, and this will be the email address. So that is what the page block has done. It's basically segregated the whole page into two. So this is the first part of the page, and in the second part of the page you have your form, and these are the details. Now to make it better, what I can do is I can add a header and I can add title to the page block. Okay, so I have my page block here. I'm gonna say title is equal to enter details below. Okay, so if I save this, what you will get to see is there being a title for this page block. So this is where the page block tag was defined. So we have a title for it. Now next, I'm going to create a section. Okay, now still this is not clarity, so I want to add labels to these three. So in Visualforce you have a default option, by just creating something called as page block section, then the labels will be created for those fields. Repeat. So in Visualforce you have an option to create page block section. So if I define page block section, then by default field labels will be created for whatever fields I have inside that page block section. Okay, so since this is the page block section, sorry, right now it's just the page block, I'll need to first create a page block section. And when I create that page block section, I need to define there being these many columns, and these being the fields can fall under those columns, and I can also give a title to that particular page block section. And when I do that, then whatever fields fall under those respective columns, those things will by default get a field label, right? So by default the field label for this is last name, for this is phone number, and for this field the label is email address. So right now they're not visible. If I want to add those things, then I can just create a page block section, and when I do that, it will automatically be visible. So the tag again for that is apex page block section. Okay, now this one I'm gonna give some extra spacing for this, and the page block section ends after my field values, okay, but before my page block. So this is where the page block section ends, the tag ends here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to define there to be a title for this page block section, and the title is going to be enter below. Okay, but I have to have it inside inverted commas. So I'm going to say enter details. So that is going to be the title, and when I save this, then what you can see on the screen is this. So like I told you, the moment you enter page block section, they are defined, correct? The labels are automatically appear. The labels are appear alongside the fields. So we have these three fields. Initially they were not labeled, and now they are labeled. And you also have this option. This was the page block section. This was the page block that was defined from here. Page block section was defined over here, and then these are the three fields. Now I can also define the number of columns that I can have in my page block. So right now, by default, there are just 2 columns. Okay, page block section has a takes by default 2 columns to be present inside. If I want even my phone number to be alongside these 2, then I can just go and define the number of columns to be 3. And where can I do that? In the same line, when I'm defining the tag next to title, I can say number of columns. Okay, and I'm going to define that to be 3. And when I save it, my page, let's wait for the page to get refreshed. Okay, so see, it's ready. So you have your last name, email address, and phone number, 3 different columns. If I have 4, then there will be place for another field to be present here, and you will have more space. You can add another field over there. But if you don't increase the number of columns, then it will again be available or visible only below this, because there's place only for 3 columns as per our code. So that is about page block section and page values. Now I don't think I've told you how data can be inserted. Okay, so we spoke about adding data to the records all the time. I've shown you how the insert works with Apex. Now from Visualforce, if I want to add data, how do I do it? So I will have my last name here, I will have my email address here, and I'll have my phone number. Okay, now these are details ready, but how will my Visualforce page transfer this data to the database, right? To the contact object. So in our case, I created these 3 fields for my contact object. How will it go? That is what I'm going to show you now. Okay, so again, for that you need to write another 2-line code, 2 to 3 lines of code. That can, of course, that will be inside your page form, but it should be outside your page block. Okay, so outside your page block section also. Okay, so let me give you a heads up. The tag you'll be using is apex:command button. Okay, so when you say command button, there are two kinds of commands that can happen when you click on those buttons. So you can also refer to consider them as call to actions or something like that. So you'll find such submit buttons everywhere in any registration page, right? So they are referred to as submit button, and there'll be another option called cancel alongside that. And if you click on submit, the details that are entered here, that will go inside. And if you click on cancel, then your registration will be canceled. So that's how it works. And since it's command button, I'm going to create one command button tag over here. I'm going to again say apex:command button. I'm going to give the value equal to submit. Okay, and so submit is what will be visible, and what will be the action. Action is the keyword here. Okay, what action means is what will happen if we click on that particular button. So submit is what will be visible on that particular button, but what will be the action that will happen when a user clicks on that particular button will be defined by this action. So I'm going to say action is equal to, and inside brackets I'm going to say save. Okay, so it's already closed, so there's no need for that. Okay, so now I'm going to save this. It's getting refreshed, and just wait for it. So you can see a submit button right here. So whenever I have some details and I click on submit, then that particular detail will go into my database. Okay, so there's no last name that I entered, so that's why we have this error. So I'm going to refresh this. Alongside submit, I also want to create another button for cancel. Okay, so to create the cancel button, I can have the same thing. Okay, I can create another apex command button. Okay, there's a mistake in the syntax. There should be no space. So the syntax is command button. Okay, and the value that I want to appear over the button would be, let's say, cancel. Don't send details or something like that. Do not submit. Okay, that sounds better. Don't submit. Okay, I have that. And then what would be the action? So action is defined as cancel itself. So this is kind of the keyword here. Okay, so when I save this, okay, so there's an error here on line number 25. Now what is the error? Okay, so I have not given the double quotes. Okay, double quotation mark. So now I think it should be fine. You should save. Okay, it's great, right? So this is what we expected to do before. We have two different buttons now. One is the submit button and the other is the don't submit button. So when I click on don't submit, basically the data will not go to my database, it'll get cancelled. And when I do submit, it'll go into my database. Okay, so let me add details here. So let me first show you the contacts object and verify that there's no other contact over here. So right now there's only Oliver Michael. So I'm going to add details here. I'm going to say the last name to be Joseph. Okay, so 1 minute. It's a mistake here. Okay, Joseph. And then let's say the email ID is joe@gmail.com. And then I'm going to give the phone number as this, just a random phone number. And when I click on submit, this details will go into my database. It's successfully added. So as you can see, it's visible here, correct? So the name is Joseph. Since I've given only the last name, only Joseph is visible as that. Okay, there's nothing else. The first name is not visible. Okay, so I can choose the title to be Mr. or something, but the last name is Joseph. I can give the first name here. Let me say I want to update the first name to be George Joseph. Okay, and if I give okay, then it'll get updated here. So that is how simple it is with Apex and Visualforce, guys. So that's the power of controller. So what I did was, let me open my Apex page again. So for that, I have to give Apex slash the page name, and that was a demo page, right? So when I click enter, I go back to that page. So this is the page. Let's just wait for it to load completely. So this was the image, and yeah, so we had only the last name, the email address, and the phone number field. And the moment they went inside and the moment they went inside my database, they were created. Okay, the Mr. tag and the first name was not added, so I added that manually, and the email and phone number was anyways there. So that is the thing. Let me show you another scenario. Okay, supposing I don't have a last name, because this is a compulsory field from the form, it has to come. Supposing I don't give last name, and if I only give email, okay, and if I just give a random phone number, and if I try submitting, then it won't happen, because it would throw an error saying you must enter value. That is because it's a compulsory field. So that is the power of Salesforce, and that is the power of Visualforce. So nothing is impossible, so everything is easy. It's just a little bit of coding that is needed. And if you all have any doubts, please put that in the chat box. And I've not got any questions, so I'm going to assume it's all fine, it's all easy. I'm going to move on. All right. So to go to my next topic, what I'll do is I'll go to my slides first and see what is left today to cover in today's session. So we were talking about controllers, correct? This is what I created. I showed and I told you how it works. So I defined contact as my standard controller, and I showed you how to create a form inside that. And these are the things that we already discussed. So going to the next topic, it is the final topic of today's session, and that is testing and handling exceptions. So if you all are from a programming background, then you all definitely know what's exception. But for those of you who don't know what exception handling is, so I'm just going to give you a brief and give you an introduction before I show you a demonstration. So let's first read the definition. Okay, what's there here? An exception is a special condition that changes the normal flow of execution. Absolutely correct. And then we have unhandled exceptions makes the process come to an halt. Okay, DML statements will be rolled back, and we can use try, catch, and finally construct for catching exceptions in Apex. For those of you who didn't understand exception and what that is with respect to Apex, to give you an idea, in general, in programming concepts itself, if you have an error in your program, right, and if you want to catch that error, and if you want to let the user know what the error is, then you can do it by using exception handling. So you can do that by using the method try and catches. Okay, so we have two methods, try and catch, and using that you can basically create a program such that an error will be thrown right away when there's a mistake that's being committed by the user. Now let me first show you the demonstration of this try catch with respect to exception handling, how you can handle exceptions. When I show the demo, you will basically understand where we can use exception handling and how we can how we can benefit a lot out of using that. So for that purpose, I'll have to go back to my developer console. So my developer console is here. I need to click on this drop down on developer console. Okay, session has been idle. This was the last program that I executed. I'm going to open the anonymous window and just execute my logic over here. Okay, so I'm not going to create any public class and all those things from the beginning. So basically it is the same, right? It's if you want to write only the logic, then you can write the logic here and execute that logic. So that is the advantage with the anonymous window. I'm going to just write the logic here. So first of all, going by the logic, let's say I'm using contact C is equal to new contact. I'm going to show you that what kind of error you will get. Okay, what kind of error you will get and how you can handle that error and how you can create exceptions for that error. Okay, so for that I'm going to say c dot first name. Okay, I'm going to say is equal to I can give XYZ. All right, and then I can say insert C. Do you all know what the problem would be in this code? Can anybody guess? Can Mayank, can you guess? Neil, can you guess? Okay, so I have an answer here from Mayank. He says the problem is that the last name is not there, and that's a required field. Yeah, so that's exactly that's the whole point of this example. So if you try inserting details like this, right? If I do an insert C, then this details will not go into my database. That is because with just the first name, the record cannot be created. Last name is a compulsory field. So let me show you by executing it once. Okay, so this is the error. Okay, so I have to have it in single quotes. Okay, and when I say execute, so see the error comes up, right? It says required field is missing. the required field is last name. So that is the problem now. Okay, since last name has to be added, how will my users who are using the application, when they are trying to insert something, how will they be notified? So because this was a program, it straight away showed me that there's an error. If I want to let people know, then I can use a try method over here. Okay, I can use that condition. I can create the solution here by defining a try block. Okay, so inside my try block, I can have these details. And if there are any errors that happen within the try block, then those can be thrown as exceptions. So now you should be able to understand, because earlier I just told you that you will get an error when you create this. Okay, but how will you handle that error? How will you, even though you know there's an error that's going to come, how will you handle that? That can be done with the help of this try and catch block. So that is what try does. Okay, so in whatever's code is there under the try method, all those errors will be caught by defining the catch method. Well, in fact, you will have parameters here, and the parameters are exception e. Okay, so exception again is the keyword here, and e is the variable that I'm defining. So when we say exception e, then that error will be caught as an exception, and that will be stored over here. Okay, and if I do a system.debug and if I try to print e, then that error will be printed as an error message. It will not stop my execution flow. My program will get executed successfully. It will just show me an error at the end after the program is executed successfully. That time it will show me an error. Okay, so by doing a system.debug, and here if I say missing required field, and if I save give a colon, and if I save this, or sorry, execute it, then this code will get executed successfully. Like I told you, it's a success, but this is unread. Okay, so if I open it and if I click on debug only, then you'll note that the program is executed successfully, and the output is that the missing required field is generated as my message. Okay, so ideally what we need to take away from here is that the error that comes up in a particular set of code, that is not going to stop the execution flow of your program. Okay, it is just that that error will be captured, and that error will be displayed as an error message. You will not get a message. So even if there's another line you're saying system.debug record added successfully, that will not be displayed. Correct? So that will not be displayed because there's actually an error, and when that error is caught, the exception will be thrown. So that is the logic here. This is a simple example or illustration of how the try-catch methods can be used to capture errors that are going to occur, and handle those errors effectively. So guys, it's pretty simple, how to show errors, right? Now in this case, only the last name was missing. Okay, but later in my code, some other day in my contact, what if I make email as a compulsory field? What if I make phone number also to be a compulsory field? So what will I do? So I cannot create a new program and create a new logic for that and implement it all over again, right? So in that case, instead of having to say missing required field every single time or all of these things, I can simply prefix this with DML exception. And what I can do is I can just say error. I can give a colon and specify the variable itself here. Okay. In fact, this is how it will look like. In fact, I have to concatenate it. When I do it this way, then basically whatever error is caught, right, that will be displayed here. So I will have an this will be the text that will appear, error and colon, and followed by that the actual error will be displayed. Correct? So instead of me having to specifically say missing required field every single time, so whatever error that actually thrown here, right, whatever error is there, that itself, that main error generated by the system, that itself will be displayed here. So that is what I'm doing here by catching that exception, and that exception error is thrown here. So when I execute this, my next log is also created. It's a success. When I try to view it, and if I click on debug only, so as you can see, it's a little different than previous, right? So this is the system error itself, which was generated because there was an error. That error was captured by the catch block because it was written inside the try block. and since the catch block caught it, that exception was displayed. Okay, so it says error system.dml exception, and then here you have the actual problem. It says insert failed, first exception on row 0, the first error, required field missing. So this is the actual error that we got earlier when we tried to add details straight away from the anonymous window. Correct? If you remember sometime back when I had tried to just execute this part of code, we got the same error. So that same error was captured this time by the try block, and using the catch block, the exception was generated and thrown to me. So that is the advantage of exceptions in Apex and Salesforce. So going back to my slides, so well, I've discussed about exception handling. Let me go to the next and the final topic, that is testing. Okay. So the concept of testing should be familiar to everyone. So I don't need to specify the importance of testing. You all know how important it is to test applications before they are deployed into production. But the thing with Apex is that testing is taken even more seriously. So what Salesforce have done is they have said that whatever code you write for any program, in that code, at least 75% of that code should come under the test coverage, so that you will know exactly where the problem is in your software. So what it means is that, let me open my developer console for a minute. And test classes, I'll write it as an Apex class, all right? So I cannot do it on my anonymous window. So I'm going to create a new Apex class, and let me start off by giving the name first. Okay, I'm going to give testcal as the name of the Apex class. Okay, so there's a duplicate. So what I'll do is I'll just create class with a different name. Let's say calculator, calculate. Okay, so this is going to be the name of my class. I'm going to say okay. All right, so I have my class name here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all annotate this class with is test. Okay, and it's not going to be public. I will say private class. Okay, and then inside this I'm going to create a new method here. Okay, so that method will have my code, and so let me call that method. So basically I will be creating another method, and I will have my code inside that method, and this method will be present inside the class, and it will work that way. Okay, so let's say private static void test sum. I'm going to give this as the name for my method, and inside the method I'm going to give the integer values. Okay, so like I told you earlier, the program that I showed earlier, right? So a calculator program, I'm going to show a similar one. So I'm going to define the variables first, the 3 different variables that I want in my program. Then I'm going to initialize a value of 3 to 1, and then let's say my b has a value of 4, and c is equal to a plus b. Okay, and then in test cases, right, you have something called as asserts, because basically how things work is you will have the is test annotation on top of that, and when the annotation is there, it means that this class comes under is basically a test case. Okay, and the test case will have will either be a success or it will be a failure. Correct? So it will have a pass case or a fail case. So how will you determine if the output is a pass case or a fail case? So here I just have c is equal to a plus b. So this was just the program that I created earlier, but this is not really what I want for my test case. So I need to determine if the value, if the class actually executed correctly. Correct? So for that I have to use some kind of assertion, and assertion in Apex we have something called as assert equals. Okay, we can use that that function to determine if your expected value is the same as your actual value. So supposing take the example of this class. Okay, we have 3 different variables. We have a and b, and then that's the value, the addition of a and b is present in c. Okay, now the actual value is 7. Okay, so c's value is 7, but supposing the expected value is 8 and the actual value is 7, then there's an error, right? The test case has failed, so the class has failed. Then people will know that there is something wrong in the code, and then they will realize that okay, and then they can make changes to the code, right? So in our example, actually the value would be 7 itself, so the expected value would be 7, 3 plus 4. But what if the value that actually comes out from the program is something different? In that case, what would you do? because there are two different answers. The code is not actually giving you the actual output. It's not giving you the exact output. It's deceiving. So an example of that would be, supposing in the code I've by mistake I've said 3a into b. Okay, so this basically means 3 into 4. Okay, the answer would be 12. So when I do a system.debug, then it would print the value of 12, but the actual value that I want to be returned is 3 plus 4, that is 7, and 12 and 7 are not the same. There's a mismatch. So that is when the test class will fail. Okay, now since the actual value and the expected value is not the same, the test class will fail, and developers will know that, okay, this part of code is where there is a bug or there's an error. Correct? So that is what is the advantage with creating test classes. And pretty much every developer knows how important it is to create different test cases and all. So let me just quickly show you an example of that. So I'm going to say system.debug. Okay, and let's not say system.debug. Let's assert the value straight away. Okay, I'm going to say system.assert equals. In here, I'm going to have the expected value and my actual value. So first of all, what is the value that I actually expect here? In case I wanted, assuming that this is 3 plus 4. Okay, so then the expected value would be 3 plus 4, 7, right? So I would want this value, but the actual value that is returned would be 3 into 4, because that is what is there as per my code. So I'm just going to define C over here, because that value will be here, and that value will be compared with this expected value. Okay, so that's how assert works. And when we give this, it will compare and it will determine that this is wrong. So this code has failed, this class has failed, and then it will throw an error, and the developers can then fix the bug. So when I just save this, this program, then automatically I will, there'll be a log that will be generated. Correct? Okay. So I know what the problem is. So I need to annotate even this method here. Okay, I'm going to annotate it with isTest, and I'm going to save this. So now that you've annotated even the method and the class, now I can just save this and then click on run test for executing. Okay, so when you click on run test, right, so it says running test synchronously and it's a success. So there are two reports that are generated. So there were 2 times I clicked run test, and because of that there are 2 reports generated, and both the places it says assertion failed, right? So if you see, if I open any of these, then you'll have the same output. And if you go under this test tab here, so the logs will all be visible here. Okay, so you can view the log over here. So this is the log, and if you go to tests, then it'll give you a list of all the tests that were executed. Okay, so it says that there were 2 test cases. So basically I executed that 2 times, and that is the output here. Correct? So it says that there was a failure in executing this test class, and you can see the status here. It says it's failed. Okay, and it was test sum. That was the program that was executed. But supposing, what if I can make this test pass, right? So what then? Because I know this failed because of this reason, because I made it asterisk. Now what if I change it to plus? If I make it C is equal to A plus B, and then if I run system assert equals 7 comma C, then this case will pass. Correct? Now if I just save this, and if I just click on run test, then let's wait for the execution to happen again. It's a success. And so here you see, as you can see from here, the test case is now a success. So I'm just going to close these other things, and see, the test case is a success here. Okay, it says it's passed. And so that's how simple you will know whether a particular test failed, and you'll know which test failed, which test class failed. Because if you have say 1,000-line code, then in when you run the code at the end with all these annotations, then it will show the class name, right? So in my case it was calculate, and then I had a method called test sum. So it says my class, which was called calculate, that executed successfully, and also my test sum, which is my method inside the class. So both these executed successfully. Now if you see in the case when it failed, right, so here it says both my method and my class failed. So this is how simple it is to find out which class of yours failed or which method of yours failed. So if I have say 2 different classes here, or let's say let's take a bigger example. Let's say if we have 10 different classes which spans to around 1,000, 10,000 lines. In that case, if you have such test annotations before your classes, and if you execute them, then you'll know which of those test classes failed, and you'll know which of them passed. So it's easier for you to drill down and find out where the error was, and you can fix them right away. Right, you can make them bug free. So that is the benefit of having test classes in your Apex code, and annotating your classes with isTest. So guys, all clear? So I hope everything is clear, and I'm gonna guess it's all fine then. So I'm just gonna quickly go back to my slides now, and if you all do have any doubts with respect to anything, so please put that in, and in the meanwhile I'll just conclude my session. All right, in case you guys want to get take up this course and learn Salesforce in detail, you can get started by going to the website. Check out our course at www.edureka.co/salesforce-foundation-combo. So our course is it's led by an instructor, it's live, and it's online. So 3 big benefits that you get by going for any Edureka course, and you can just check out our course details. You can check out what we have to offer. You can see all that in on this website. Okay, so basically in today's session it was just an introduction to the developers. Okay, what would the Salesforce developers be doing? So it was an introduction to Salesforce developers webinar. But if you take up this course, then you'll learn more about Salesforce developers, and you'll get to learn more advanced things, and it would make way for you being a Salesforce developer eventually, to make that as a career. So that is the possibility that you have. So these were some of the reviews that we got from some of our previous customers, and this is what they have to say about it. So you can always check this out. Again, you will find that in our website. So assuming that there are no questions, I'm going to end this session now. And thank you guys for being a part of the session. It was a good session. So catch you all sometime soon. Until then, take care, and bye-bye. Okay.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply to them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist, and subscribe to our Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!